Chapter 61. When Hellion Vivian opened her eyes, this was the scene she saw. Lazily stretching his waist, he was as cunning and elegant as a fox. She thought that this was the fastest consort selection ceremony she had ever seen. When she was reading novels, didn't she have to filter through them layer by layer? What happened to the musical instrument, chess, calligraphy, and painting performances? Why did the third prince decide on the Hellion Jower after she slept? It seemed that the legendary #1 young master in the world didn't have good taste. She yawned as if it had nothing to do with her. Just as she was about to pack up and leave, she saw that everyone around her had their eyes wide open, as if they had seen a ghost. And the Hellion Jower had a pale face, looking at her with resentful and vicious eyes, as if she couldn't wait to strangle her to death. Wait a minute. Why did a hand appear in front of her eyes? And that hand was very good-looking, slender, and very strong. Even the nails were very clean. She thought that when such a hand held a gun and killed people, it would be very beautiful. On your face. A cold male voice sounded beside her ear, so cold that she came back to her senses. Hellion Vivian followed the direction of his finger and wiped her face, then looked at the pastry crumbs on her finger. Wipe it? The man's eyes hidden under the silver mask didn't show any joy or anger. He just casually threw her a pure white handkerchief. Hellion Vivian was stunned. She thought that only women would use handkerchiefs. She didn't expect that the royal would also use one. A man who used a handkerchief. Was there a problem with his sexual orientation? It seemed that she was right before. The third prince really liked men, but she really didn't expect that the third prince would be the one at the bottom. Once she was done with this, she would definitely share this secret with her little brother. But since there was a handkerchief, it would be a waste not to use it. Hellion Vivian casually wiped the corner of her mouth. For a moment, even her breath carried the faint scent of the man's body, enough to see how delicate this person's life was. After Hellion Vivian finished, she handed the handkerchief back. Thank you for the royal's handkerchief. Beligaju looked at the yellow handkerchief that was covered with dregs and slightly wrinkled his thick eyebrows. Hellion Vivian continued to pass it to him. Miss Wei Wei, eunuch's son, who was trembling with fear at the side, gritted his teeth. How can you directly hand a dirty handkerchief to His Highness? Hellion Vivian reacted. Her shrewd eyes turned and she smiled. Then I'll return it to the royal family after I wash it? Under normal circumstances, this man would definitely refuse. Since he didn't accept the handkerchief just now, it proved that he had a very strong misophobia. A misophobe would definitely not accept things that had been used by others. Quickly refuse, quickly refuse. This sister doesn't have time to wash your handkerchief for you. Yes. Beligaju looked at her for a while, and a smile seemed to flash across his eyes as he responded in a low voice. Hellion Vivian was dumbfounded. She actually didn't reject him? How could he not follow his own script? For the first time in her life, she had a problem with her reasoning. This man seemed to be more difficult to predict than she thought. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. Gradually, it didn't matter. It was just a handkerchief. She didn't have to argue with this man. Anyway, it was convenient to wash it. She simply picked it up and casually stuffed the handkerchief. It didn't seem like she cherished it at all. Eunuch's son sucked in a breath of air again. He subconsciously looked at Beligaju's face. The man's expression was very indifferent, but his eyes were colder than before. Everyone stared blankly at this scene. Some didn't understand what the royal family meant. After all, no matter who thought, they wouldn't associate these two people together. Hellion Wei Wei's figure was indeed good, but that face of hers was so dark that it made people not dare to compliment her. Her entire body was like a black coal ball. The royal family shouldn't want to choose this person. Then what was the meaning of his actions now? No one could understand what Bailey Jiaju was thinking, because he didn't say another word to Wei Wei. Instead, he absent-mindedly strolled around, one hand hanging by the side of his leg, the other hand holding little bald head, and walked towards the direction of Spirit Forest. It was as if the matter of throwing a handkerchief to Hellion Vivian was as easy as lifting his hand. Even Eunuch's son, who was following beside him, couldn't make sense of it. Seeing his master walk away, he immediately followed. Hellion Jiao Air was undoubtedly the most embarrassed and humiliated one. She originally thought that the person Bailey Jiaju wanted to talk to was her. Even the surrounding people also thought so. She was already prepared to stand up, but in the end, the Hellion Jiao's red fingertips tightly clenched the handkerchief. The more she clenched, the tighter she clenched, the tighter the handkerchief changed shape. It was that slut again. Why was it that slut again? Second sister. In order to reduce the Hellion Jiao's embarrassment, after Baligaju left, Hellion Mei also stood up. Holding onto her arm, she said with disdain. Who in the capital doesn't know that His Highness likes cleanliness the most? Someone deliberately made a sloppy appearance in order to attract His Highness's attention. Little sister can only say that this is really a good trick. We can't learn it. Having heard what was said, those young ladies from famous families who also didn't like Wei Wei also followed and stood up one after another. Mei Mimi is right. Everyone knows that His Highness likes cleanliness. In my opinion, His Highness really can't stand it anymore. That's why he took out the handkerchief and told someone to quickly clean herself up, so as not to be an eyesore. I reckon that His Highness also didn't expect that someone would take the initiative to ask to wash His Highness's handkerchief. That's why I said that ugly people are always mischievous. First it was the heir, then it was Grandmaster Zizun, and now it's His Highness. But it's a pity that His Highness doesn't fall for her tricks. This is only the beginning. In the end, it still depends on strength. Hearing the ridicule from all around, the Hellion Jiao immediately revealed an aggrieved smile. Holding back her tears, she shook her head towards Hellion Mei. Let's not talk about this anymore. We should properly prepare to enter the spirit forest in a moment. Hellion Mei didn't want to let it go so easily. She shouted towards Hellion Vivian. You think that you can curry favor with anyone? Stop dreaming. Hellion Vivian didn't pay attention to her. It wasn't because she was magnanimous, but because from the moment Baligaju left, Yuan Ming had been talking to her. Yuan Ming woke up and was in the middle of communicating with her mentally. You must be careful when you enter the spirit forest. Don't just casually release your own martial qi. Only release your energy when you see a suitable divine beast. Otherwise, if you meet a divine beast that is stronger than you, it is very likely that you will be devoured. I know, Hellion Vivian said as she stood up. Just as she stood up, she saw that the group of rich girls were looking at her with disgust. Even the aristocratic young masters standing behind them were looking at her with mixed feelings. Hellion Vivian was already used to this kind of situation. Right now, she was only thinking about what Yuan Ming had told her. The quality of a mythological beast could very likely affect a martial artist's cultivation. This was because a powerful mythological beast wasn't as simple as a mount. When the real competition came, it could also attack and defend. When necessary, it could even protect its owner's life. Hellion Wei Wei didn't think that this was merely an ordinary consort selection, yet it would involve the issue of a spirit beast. Her original plan of rushing to the gathering couldn't be realized, so she might as well take a stroll around Spirit Forest. Who knows, maybe she'd have an unexpected harvest. Hellion Vivian smiled coldly. She didn't even look at those people. She took an osmanthus cake and left the banquet. It was her attitude that was so hateful. It was as if she couldn't be bothered to argue with them. Hellion Jiao tightly bit the thin meat in her mouth. She took a deep breath, but she couldn't get rid of the jealousy that surged from the bottom of her heart. It seemed that she had been too kind to that bitch Hellion Vivian. She shouldn't have listened to her grandfather and done nothing. The spirit forest? Then she wouldn't let her return. Chapter 62. Morong Changfeng, who hadn't said a word from beginning to end, clenched his hands into fists, the thumb ring in his hand piercing deeply into his palm. Didn't she like him? Didn't she keep saying that she wouldn't marry anyone but him? Now she was entangled with the third prince. Morong Changfeng clenched his jaw, his eyes forming a thick layer of ice. The servant standing beside him observed his expression and took the opportunity to speak. This woman, it seems like she's once again clinging onto the royal family. Fortunately, the lord divorced her, otherwise she would have been disgraced again. Morong Changfeng didn't speak, waving his long sleeves, bringing out a chilly air. The servant frowned, puzzled. According to reason, the lord should be happy. If that woman changed her target, then she wouldn't bother the lord anymore. Then the Lord would be able to find time to do the big thing that the Lord said. But the Lord didn't seem to be smiling at all. The servant hesitated for a moment, then hurriedly followed. White Academy's back mountain was the spirit forest. The most frightening thing inside was not only the mythological beasts, but also the strange terrain that could cause people to lose their way. Therefore, in reality, the people who entered the spirit forest to train were most afraid of not being able to deal with the mythological beasts and the so-called ghosts, but getting lost. There was once a person who entered the spirit forest and never came out again. Therefore, in this aspect, the Academy's elders had always been very cautious, only allowing the new students to follow the prescribed route. Even if they didn't find a mythological beast, it didn't matter. Although mythological beasts were very precious, under normal circumstances, they wouldn't be easily contracted by humans. Unless the contractor convinced them, then they would bow down to the contractor. Of course, there were many types of mythological beasts. There were good ones and bad ones. The quality of the mythological beast was directly related to the strength of the contractor's martial chi. The stronger the contractor's martial chi, the stronger the mythological beast that was summoned. Like the third prince's mount, the fire Chilan, was an ancient mythological beast. Some people said that ancient mythological beasts were the most rebellious animals in the world. To be able to contract them, the contractor's future would be limitless. But this time, those who entered the spirit forest were all new students, so they wouldn't be able to contract with any ancient mythological beasts. At most, they would be able to bring out a storm wolf. Apart from those few especially talented people from the superior compound, it was reckoned that the other noble young ladies were just going in to join in on the fun. What's more, it's that useless trash who doesn't know anything. Hellion May glanced at Hellion Vivian with disdain. Then, she started chatting with her friends. Do you think someone will be so scared that she won't even be able to walk back? It's very possible. When we went out to play in the past, she was so scared that she didn't even dare to breathe. It can't be, right? I heard that she's an arrogant hedonist with her life on the line. How could she be afraid of a whistling dog? She only knows how to be arrogant in front of others, but when something really happens, she runs faster than anyone else. Then what's the point of forming a contract with a divine beast? She'll probably be scared to death by the divine beast before she can even chant the incantation. Ha ha ha. The mocking laughter from all around grew louder and louder. It was as if everyone was waiting for Hellion Vivian to run away. The corners of Hellion Jower's mouth hooked up. She faced Hellion Vivian and said hypocritically, "Big sister, if you can't do it, then don't force yourself. The spirit forest is different from the outside world. If you're not careful, then you'll lose your life." Hellion Vivian didn't pay attention to Hellion Jower. She was too lazy to talk to her right now. Hellion Jower saw her like this and coldly snorted in her heart. She knew that this cheap woman wouldn't be able to get rid of her old habits. She didn't know her own worth, and yet she was so stubborn. Did she think that she could form a contract with a mythological beast with her mediocre skills? That was simply an idiot's dream. But this wasn't a bad thing. Everything was going according to her plan. Hellion Jiao Air slowly smiled. When she lowered her head, the light in her eyes seeped out a poison that was difficult to detect. Everyone was focused on the precautions for entering the spirit forest. No one noticed that Hellion Jower and Minister Jing glanced at each other. Their expressions were gloomy and deep. Since that cheap woman Hellion Vivian didn't know her place, then they might as well make her disappear completely. At dusk, a faint golden light leaped out from the eastern horizon, illuminating the entrance of the spirit forest. A large stretch of trees that reached the sky. The branches intertwined and the leaves were dense, sheltering the sun. The school's master once again warned the new students, "Don't go the wrong way. You must follow the instructions on the map and come out of the forest within the specified time. Regardless of whether or not you can form a contract with a mythological beast, you must obey." After saying this, the master distributed the map to everyone who was about to enter the spirit forest. Hellion Vivian held the paper between her fingers and immediately memorized the rough path. Originally, she wanted to call Yuan Ming out to analyze the terrain, but she didn't know why. But since the appearance of Beligaju, Yuan Ming seemed to have no strength. Now, he simply entered a state of hibernation. Hellion Vivian was more or less worried about him. She thought that when they came out of the spirit forest, she would go down the mountain and fight a few battles to make Yuan Ming more spirited. The new students had already begun to enter the spirit forest through the entrance. The third prince was also among them, but he was different from the others. He looked very lazy, as if he was taking a stroll in his own back garden. At the beginning, everyone was still walking together. But once they entered the spirit forest, they began to fend for themselves and scattered in all directions. Hellion Vivian followed the map in her hands. The deeper she went into the forest, the more she felt as if there was something calling out to her. The sound hit her heart. Come here. Come here. She looked around, but didn't find anything strange. But when she listened carefully, the sound was gone. Strange. Hellion Vivian took another step forward, but found that the path on the ground had disappeared. She didn't have time to retract her leg, and her whole body was sucked into a gust of wind. The master, who was standing not far from her, suddenly panicked. He quickly walked over. Who was the one who took the wrong path? The most powerful student in Baligaju had already gone far away. At this time, only a few of the less talented new students were standing there. Seeing this shocking scene, they stammered, "Yes, it seems to be the inferior compound's Hellion Vivian." The inferior compound? This old man knows. You guys continue. Pay attention, don't take the wrong path again. These new students from the inferior compound were really stupid. They could even take the wrong map. They didn't understand why the headmaster would accept them. The master casually threw away the paper he had picked up, his face full of indifference. Since it was that trash, there was nothing to worry about. Even if she died, no one would care. Chapter 63. Hellion Vivian looked at the place where she was. It was a shade of green grass and shrubs. Every plant seemed to be able to emit a faint green light. Right in front of her was a stream. When she fell, she just fell into the stream. Now her clothes were wet. When the cold wind blew, she couldn't help but sneeze a few times. There were some wet trees at the bottom of the cliff, which couldn't make a fire at all. Hellion Vivian could only follow the current to the narrower direction of the downstream river. If she slept with such wet clothes tonight, it would be difficult not to catch a cold tomorrow. After walking for nearly an hour, Hellion Vivian found a leeward place. She picked up some dead leaves and branches, and carefully looked for 2 pieces of flint. Finally, she set up a bonfire and sat down on the grass. Her current physical fitness was not as good as that of the 21st century. Her aptitude was too weak. After walking for a while, she felt tired. This was too unfavorable for a warrior. It seemed that when she practiced martial chi in the future, she had to strengthen some external exercises. While Hellion Wei Wei was thinking, she took off her outer and inner garments and hung them by the fire to dry. Her inner garments were quickly dried as the flames licked and licked. After resting for a while, Hellion Wei Wei walked around again. She didn't put out the fire that had been lit. In the forest, fire was more important than guns, because fire could not only identify coordinates, but also drive away hungry wolves. Hellion Vivian was an ace agent. She was better at the jungle than anyone else. So soon, she found that something was wrong here. She frowned. What the hell is this place? I can't get out of here. From the beginning, she had been circling in the same place. Hellion Vivian intuitively felt that something was wrong. There was no one around, and Yuan Xiaoming couldn't ask. Hellion Vivian simply took things as they came. She took a wooden branch, put a fish in the stream, removed the scales, and roasted it on the fire. No matter what, one should never mistreat their own stomachs. Hellion Vivian licked her thin lips. When the fish was cooked, she plucked a few strawberries from her space. She crushed them and smeared the juice on the back of the fish. As the oil dripped down, it was accompanied by a sizzling sound. After a while, a fragrant aroma wafted out. Hellion Vivian smells the smell and plans to enter the space to see if there are any seasonings that can be used. When she comes out, the 3 fish become 2. What the hell? Where did the 3rd fish go? Don't tell her that the fish grew wings and flew away. If that happened, she would flip the table. Hellion Wei Wei's brows were furrowed when a rustling sound entered her ears. She looked sideways and saw a white wild cat staring at her by the fire. It raised its ears and looked at her alertly. There was a freshly roasted fish hanging on its paw. One person and one cat coldly looked at each other. Wei Wei was still fine. Sitting in her original place, she didn't feel anything. However, a little wild cat with one paw raised was using its remaining 3 paws to stand on the ground. It was clearly somewhat unsteady on its feet. Finally, it staggered and sprawled on the ground, somewhat discouraged as it let out an "a-woot" sound. Helly and Wei Wei couldn't hold it in any longer and burst out laughing. After all, it was not every day to see a wild cat fall down because of stealing. This strange scene could not be seen every day. The little wild cat looked at her with resentment and took a bite of the fish in its hand to vent its anger. Helly and Vivian looked at it with a smile and did not stop it. The wild cat looked small and should not pose any threat. The little wild cat saw that its behavior was acquiesced. It quickly lowered its head and bit. It seemed that it had been hungry for a long time. The fish went into its stomach in an instant. Just when Wei Wei thought that it had eaten its fill and was about to leave, the wild cat's pointed little face unexpectedly scrunched up into a ball. It lifted its front paw, covered its throat, and made a few sounds similar to coughing. When Helly and Wei Wei finally understood what happened, she started to hold her belly and laugh out loud in a very ungraceful manner. A stray cat stole a fish to eat and got a fishbone stuck in its throat. This kind of scene is probably hard to come by even once in 100 years. The little wild cat stared at the woman in front of it fiercely. Obviously, it was dissatisfied with her gloating behavior. Helly and Vivian looked at its sad face and waved at it with a smile. "Come here." The little wild cat seemed to understand human nature. It really walked to Helly and Vivian with its neck straightened. "Open your mouth." Helly and Vivian pinched its mouth with her hand and took out a silver knife from her sleeve. With the help of the fire, she carefully cut out the fish bone stuck in its throat. Helly and Vivian took the fish bone and shook it in front of its eyes. There was still bright red blood on it. She was ready to use the bloody facts to teach it a lesson. "You were stuck by this thing. Next time, remember not to." Before she finished her words, Helly and Vivian saw that the wild cat in front of her stared at the bloody fish bone in her hand. Its snow-white head shook a few times. Then, it tilted its head and fainted on the ground. Helly and Vivian was a little confused for a moment. Was this the legendary phobia of blood? Damn it, please look like a wild cat. However, it was undeniable that the wild cat in front of her was extremely beautiful. The tip of its snow-white fur was shining with silver. There was no trace of other colors on its body. It was plump and not prickly, showing a faint noble aura. Such a fur should be worth a lot of money if it was peeled off. Helly and Vivian had some evil thoughts, but the hand that stroked its fur was exceptionally gentle. The warmth from the tip of her hand made her want to get closer. However, the moment she held it in her arms, a silver light suddenly appeared around the wild cat's body. A mist filled the air and wrapped around it. After the mist dispersed, Helly and Vivian's mind went blank for a moment. No one had ever reminded her that the animals here could turn into humans at will. Helly and Vivian's arms stiffened as she looked at the man in front of her. His thick eyelashes that were like crow's wings trembled slightly as he breathed. It was not difficult to imagine how his eyes would look when he opened them. However, Mainan finally opened his eyes. But first, he looked at Helly and Vivian's posture. Then, he looked all the way down his body. When he saw that he was naked, he immediately stood up with lightning speed. His hands covered up and down, but he didn't know where to cover. Helly and Wei Wei looked at him calmly. She looked at him with some evil amusement as he was flustered. She had dealt with too many naked bodies in her previous life. She had no feelings for the human body. However, the body in front of her was really perfect. It had a slender waist and narrow buttocks. The only flaw was that it was a man. Mainan was anxious. When he turned around, he finally noticed Helly and Vivian's clothes hanging by the campfire. He hurriedly picked them up and tried to put them on. He didn't forget to whisper in a dangerous tone, "Close your eyes for me." Chapter 64. Helly and Vivian closed her eyes considerately and curled her lips. "Don't be shy, I won't pounce on you." The silver-haired beautiful man slipped, but his face didn't show any expression. His voice was very cold. "Woman, you can open your eyes." Hellion Vivian turned her head with a smile and saw that the beautiful man had already put on his clothes. His long sleeves were floating in the air, with a bit of a mortal charm. He was wearing her clothes, but the clothes were just right for him. But the arms and legs were a little short, and the sexy lines of his abdominal muscles were exposed, a layer of white. His long hair brushed against his cheeks as he buttoned up his shirt, revealing a pair of very faint silver eyes. They faintly emitted a layer of faint light, extremely bewitching. The moonlight faintly sprinkled on his face, sketching out his perfect outline. He looked very much like a beautiful boy in a manga. Not bad. Hellion Vivian touched her chin and smiled evilly. Have you ever thought that, in fact, it is more suitable for you to wear women's clothes? The beautiful man's beautiful phoenix eyes narrowed, and his head slowly turned, with a dangerous look in his eyes. If you talk nonsense again, I will swallow you. Hellion Vivian smiled more brightly. Swallow me? Are you sure? A stray cat who is dizzy with blood shouldn't be any better after turning into a human. With that, she turned her finger. I just need to bite my finger, and lose 2 drops of blood is enough for you to see. After you pass out, what do I want to do to you? Can you resist? The beautiful man's eyes paused, and his raised chin was stiff, as if he had never seen such a thick-skinned woman. He pointed at Hellion Vivian and said stubbornly, I won't lower myself to the level of a woman like you. With that, he planned to leave, but he didn't expect that as soon as he raised his feet, his body became small again, and he didn't even have a chance to struggle. Damn it! Damn it! Hey, even if you become a cat, you are still very beautiful. You don't have to lie on the ground and pretend to be dead, right? Hellion Vivian looked at the melancholy cat face in front of her and found it funny no matter how she looked at it. The white cat tilted its head, extended its front paws, and squatted in front of Hellion Vivian. It decided to stay by this woman's side before it completely regained its true form. Although he didn't know how strong she was, it was better than going out to face those greedy humans. Moreover, he always felt that there was something sleeping on her body. He had only explored a little, but he was bounced back by an unknown chi. He had never encountered such a situation before. Hellion Vivian saw the cat in front of her in a daze and raised her eyebrows. Speaking of which, why can't you even control your own body? The white cat glanced at her haughtily. I was in the middle of a tribulation. You despicable humans predicted that I would be in the tribulation period and wanted to contract me. Just now, I had a fight with that person in the West. My physical strength was exhausted, so I had no choice but to reveal my true form. Do you think ordinary people can casually see my true form? What a joke. After he said this, he gave a heavy snort. Hellion Wei crossed her arms in front of her chest and sized him up. Then why are you casually showing your true form now? The white cat suddenly felt its face burn, but then it thought that a cat's face wouldn't be seen even if it blushed, so it calmed down a lot. If I turned into my human form, who knows what a perverted woman like you would do to this king? Hey, perverted woman. This is the first time this king has been seen naked by a woman other than my imperial mother. You have to take responsibility for this king. Hearing this, Hellion Vivian silently looked away. You can leave. The white cat was stunned, as if it didn't expect someone to reject it. A strange feeling flashed through its heart. Then it said in a cold and noble voice, if it wasn't for the fact that our Whitefin clan is very particular about repaying kindness, do you think this king would let you take responsibility? Whitefin clan. Hellion Vivian looked at the white cat with her arms crossed. The descendant of an ancient divine beast? The white cat gave a cold in sound as an answer. Since you want to repay kindness, then do it. Hellion Vivian took a bite of the roasted fish and saw the white cat's body stiffen. She smiled again. Don't worry, I don't need you to do anything difficult. As long as you help me find a normal divine beast for me to contract, then take me away from this damned place. I just walked around and found that there was something here. Could it be that there was an array? Hearing this, the white cat looked at Hellion Vivian with a trace of astonishment in its eyes. Very few humans could find out that there was an array in the forest in such a short time. This woman wasn't stupid. That's right, it's an array. Looking at your clothes, you should be a student of White Academy. The white cat smiled coldly. If it wasn't for you, Those low-level divine beasts wouldn't need to set up these arrays. Divine beasts are very repulsed by humans, but they pretended to be injured in the forest, then led the kind little divine beasts over and carried out a large-scale massacre, using the blood of the divine beasts to cultivate martial chi. Helly and Vivian frowned. There's such a thing? According to what she heard from Elder Juan before, although the relationship between divine beasts and humans was tamed, but for a long time, everyone got along with each other as guardians and protected. How could there be a massacre? You don't know? The white cat raised its whiskers. That is to say, someone is going against the wishes of your White Academy's dean. Helly and Vivian still wanted to say something. She saw that there were some unknown small animals around her. They were different from the animals she had seen before. The color of their fur was very bright and smooth, as if they could emit a faint luster. One look and she knew they weren't normal. But what were they doing? Mushrooms? Or poisonous? Crucian carp? And they were still jumping around alive? Helly and Vivian watched as the little divine beasts brought the things in front of her and then quickly ran away. She raised her beautiful phoenix eyes. For me? The little divine beasts nodded their little heads in unison. Helly and Vivian fiddled with those gifts that didn't belong to the scope of human food. Her lips curved into a smile. Thank you. Hearing that, the little divine beasts happily gathered into a group, chirping. The white cat stood among them indifferently and glanced at Helly and Vivian. Its expression seemed to be saying, "You humans even have the heart to hurt such a kind child. Simply despicable." Wei Wei was speechless. From what she knew, to tame a spirit beast, one had to find a wild beast similar to a fierce tiger to fight. Whoever won the fight would be the one to call the shots. After all, in this world, only the strong survived. But using the kindness of the little divine beasts to hurt them, this was indeed a bit shameful. Helly and Vivian didn't have time to think before she was stunned, because not far away, a huge black magical beast was standing in front of her. Its red eyes were drooling as it stared at her. Obviously, it was treating her as its dessert after dinner. Chapter 65. Roar dash, the beast's roar soared into the sky, deafening everyone's ears. Helly and Vivian's expression changed. She wanted to turn around, but her legs seemed to be bound by some kind of power. No matter how she struggled, it was useless. Demonic beasts were the most ferocious beasts in the spirit forest. Their entire body was filled with poison. Unless it was a gold-ranked martial artist who dared to fight with it, the rest of the martial artists would become its food no matter how smart they were. The smell of a human, so fragrant. The demonic beast's eyes were red, and its fangs were exposed. It was like a mentally disabled person, and its mouth kept repeating the same sentence. This made Helly and Vivian's heart uneasy. Demonic beasts and divine beasts were different. Divine beasts were born with the ability to communicate. Demonic beasts, on the other hand, did not know how to speak until they reached the peak. Therefore, her chances of dying were higher. Helly and Vivian gripped the dagger in her hand and began to condense the air around her. She was a martial artist that could manipulate wind. As long as there was wind, she would be able to use it. The demonic beast seemed to have sensed something. It was displeased that this skinny little human was trying to resist its bite and heavily stomped its foot. Helly and Vivian's body was like a kite with a broken string and flew out. It was as if lightning had struck her body. Helly and Vivian only felt that her entire body was being torn apart. Her chest surged as she suddenly spat out a mouthful of black and red blood. The blood she spat out was not normal poisonous blood. It was the fusion of her inner force and true power, and the most poisonous blood in her body was also spat out. What a joke. She was the queen of arms and had hunted countless tigers. How could she be defeated in this kind of place? Helly and Wei Wei abruptly raised her chi. She didn't know which meridian she touched, but within her body, a mysterious, ancient, and profound enormous power suddenly rolled up. She was shocked by this power until she could not breathe. Her heart inexplicably trembled, and a trace of fear appeared in her heart. This was impossible for someone as proud as her. Because her body was no longer under her control, she stiffly fell to the ground. She couldn't even sense any information from the outside world. She only felt as if her body was about to be torn apart. The pain was like a sharp knife, ruthlessly cutting through every part of her body. The enormous energy that came out of nowhere was frantically wreaking havoc, flowing towards her dantian. Every time it rushed past, it would tear apart her perfectly fused true power and inner power by an inch. What was going on? Where did this strange energy come from? What was it going to do? She could feel the enormous power slowly corroding her inner strength. Two words suddenly appeared in Hellion Vivian's mind. Backlash. She didn't understand why this was the case. However, the current situation was absolutely critical. This power was powerful and domineering, and it was filled with an ancient aura. Very soon, there would be a problem with her inner energy. If her inner energy was also completely devoured, then the next one in danger would be her. Thinking of this, Hellion Vivian smiled evilly like a demon. It wanted to devour her? He had to ask her if she agreed or not. Hellion Vivian clenched her fist and immediately welcomed the strange energy. The two different powers were like two equally strong experts, fighting against each other. Gradually, that strange energy actually merged with Hellion Vivian's inner strength. Even the fallen leaves around her seemed to have changed. Bang! A pillar-sized beam of light with a trace of destructive aura surged out like a thunderbolt. It exploded on the front limbs of the demonic beast that wanted to tear Hellion Vivian apart. Ayo! A painful roar resounded through the sky. The demonic beast retreated in pain. It didn't know what happened to Hellion Vivian's body, but that ancient aura made it not dare to take a step forward. It turned around and ran. Hellion Vivian also felt that her own power was different from before. She slowly retracted her palm, but the evil aura around her body didn't dissipate. She saw the white cat looking at her, as if it was in disbelief. You've advanced? Maybe. Hellion Vivian moved her wrist. She felt that her change wasn't as simple as advancing. The white cat looked at her with deep eyes. You can go and kill that demonic beast just now. For warriors like you, the demonic beast's inner core is a great supplement. With its reminder, Hellion Vivian remembered that Yuan Ming wanted her to eat a demonic beast's inner core. Now that Yuan Ming had fallen into a deep sleep, maybe eating a demonic beast's inner core could wake him up. Of course, this was Hellion Vivian's guess. However, Hellion Vivian had always been a person who did things quickly. Since the demonic beast's inner core was beneficial to her, she might as well take it first. Thinking of this, Hellion Vivian immediately jumped and chased in the direction where the demonic beast disappeared. The white cat didn't have any intention of staying here alone. With a kick of its claws, it jumped onto Hellion Vivian's shoulder. One person and one cat cooperated with each other very well. They were both excited to be able to kill a demonic beast. But what they didn't expect was that the demonic beast would meet another person who had just arrived. The demonic beast seemed to be irritated by the continuous appearance of humans. In addition, it had just suffered from Hellion Vivian's attack, so it didn't find any human pleasing to the eye. It didn't have the mood to play games anymore, only full of hunger. Eat, eat. The demonic beast opened its mouth at the man who had suddenly appeared, and a louder thunder than before sounded in the sky above the forest. The man lazily looked at the demonic beast in front of him. The sun shone on his pure white clothes and long black hair, giving him a kind of ascetic beauty. His voice was cold, without a trace of warmth. Move aside. Perhaps it was because the man had been in a position of power for too long that even his words had a commanding tone. This made the demonic beast very unhappy. What the hell? Usually, when humans saw it, they would bow down in fear of angering it. But today, it met two people. One was more fearless than the other. Roar! The demonic beast raised its head and roared. It stretched out its sharp claws and pounced on the man. Facing such a huge creature, the man didn't even try to dodge. With a pair of deep, calm eyes, he slowly raised his slender and fair right hand. His ivory white fingers bent, and a golden and red light slowly seeped out, gradually enveloping his entire right hand. The demonic beast immediately felt that something was wrong. Its whole body trembled as it looked at this scene in horror. It quickly retreated, its eyes full of fear. It knew that it couldn't afford to offend this person. It wasn't because of how smart he was. It was because it didn't see the shadow standing behind the man. It was actually the Fire Chelan, the king of beasts, the Fire Chelan, who had such great power to be able to use the Fire Chelan for him. The demonic beast felt an unprecedented regret. If only it had moved aside when the man asked it to. Now, how could it escape the Fire Chelan's pursuit? Roar! Another earth-shattering roar sounded, but this time, it was much more miserable and vexed than before. With a flash of fire, there was no longer a trace of the demonic beast on the ground. All the beasts in the spirit forest were panicked by this roar. Even the white cat, standing on Hellion Vivian's shoulder, raised its tail. It didn't know why it felt a strange sense of oppression. Hellion Vivian frowned as she landed on the ground. The surrounding branches swayed back and forth. In the midst of the wind and clouds, a pair of straight and powerful legs walked out from the forest. Then, there was a black rose embroidered belt with a gold border. Then, there was a face with half a silver mask. Inky black hair hung down on both sides of his face. He carried a strong aura of self-restraint and indifference, like a god from the world of immortals. It's the third prince. Chapter 66. Why would he appear here? Strange. Wasn't he walking at the front with Hellion Jiaoer and the other top students? Could it be that the third prince was also lost? Hellion Vivian looked at the incomparably holy man in front of her and narrowed her phoenix eyes in confusion. The white cat standing on her shoulder revealed its claws, and its eyes were filled with unprecedented vigilance. He didn't know why, but he always felt that this human was very dangerous. Although he looked harmless, there was something wrong with him. As the descendant of the ancient divine beast, he had never felt this way before. Who exactly was this man? Royal. Hellion Vivian broke the silence with a chuckle. Have you seen a magical beast? No matter why he appeared here, the key was to get the magic core. Beligaju faintly nodded. Hellion Vivian's eyes lit up. Then where is it now? I didn't have time to see. Bailey Jiaju unhurriedly opened his mouth. The tone of his voice was indolent and apathetic. When he started to lie, he didn't blush at all. His heart didn't skip a beat. So much so that it gave people a kind of lofty elegance. You should know that I don't have an ounce of chi on my body. When I see magical beasts, I naturally have to hide. Hellion Vivian. Well, it was all because the pressure from a certain highness was too strong. She had forgotten that he had lost all his martial chi. However, I thought that was a rumor. Hellion Vivian shrewdly probed. Beligaju's expression did not change as he stretched out his left hand and channeled his inner force, but it was a cloud of white mist. This proved that he indeed did not have any martial chi. Because even if it was Hellion Vivian, when she was channeling her energy, the surrounding air would change. As for him, he couldn't summon the slightest bit of wind. Are you deliberately trying to see my incompetence? The corner of Beligaju's mouth was half raised, and no one could hear the joy or anger in his voice. Hellion Vivian knew what it felt like to be treated as trash. She said apologetically, I didn't mean that. Beligaju didn't say anything. Hellion Vivian didn't know if he was holding a grudge against her, so she decided to leave and continue chasing after the magical beast. You're leaving just like that? The graceful and luxurious voice sounded again. Beligaju looked at her like a piece of jade. What should I do? What did the third prince mean by that? What did he mean by what should he do? Bailey Jiaju absent-mindedly strolled over, that handsome face wearing a silver mask, as he gradually approached, unexpectedly had a kind of indescribable familiarity. You also said that there are magical beasts roaming around here. I also don't know martial chi. You just intend to leave me here like this, and not care about anything else? What else could he do? What else did she want to do? Hellion Vivian blinked in confusion. Beligaju only gave her 2 words. Protect the Emperor. Hellion Vivian. You're a big man. Can you not say that you want someone to protect you so naturally? Even the Fire Chelan, who was hiding in the contract space, almost vomited blood when it heard these words. It hadn't seen its master for a few years. How did he become better at pretending? We have to go out first. We'll talk about your magical beast later. Beligaju lazily turned the ring on his finger. It seemed that no matter what, this man was always so pleasing to the eye. Very good. A certain highness had already decided on her next itinerary. He really didn't give her any chance to say no. However, why would she do something that didn't benefit her? Hellion Vivian stood in place without moving, only reaching out to stroke the white cat on her shoulder. As if he saw through her thoughts, Beligaju's thin lips curved up into a smile. What? You don't want to? Then this highness can continue to keep this dragon core on me. Dragon core? A holy core that was even rarer than a magical core. It was said that eating one could reduce one's cultivation by 10 years. The people outside were right. Even if the third prince didn't have the slightest bit of martial chi, women would still drool over him. Not to mention his figure and temperament, just based on the treasures he had. It was enough to make all of the nobles in the capital go crazy with infatuation. Hellion Vivian snorted twice in her heart, suddenly feeling a bit unbalanced. They were both trash. Why was the difference between people so big? However, bringing him along was quite worth it. It was too late to chase after that magical beast anyway. Moreover, dragon cores were indeed rare. It was basically impossible to catch a divine dragon in the mainland. They still had to go to the peak of the sea. Hellion Vivian made a comparison and quickly made a decision. To be able to protect the royal family is this humble girl's honor. Dragon core, dragon core. She didn't know when Yuan Ming woke up and saw the dragon core. Would he be so excited that he would lick his lips? Bailey Jiaju didn't expose her little scheme. His always thin lips slightly curved upwards. After that, his gaze fell on her shoulder. Looking at the white cat that was brimming with hostility towards him, he smiled devilishly. The white cat's back trembled. Damn it! Why did he have a feeling that his true self was seen through by the other party? Hellion Vivian also felt Beligaju's gaze. Her expression didn't change as she said, I just picked it up. I even changed it into a set of clothes. We can cook it when we get back. Beligaju, who originally didn't have much interest in the white cat, stopped in his tracks, looked in the direction of the white cat, the corners of his eyes deep. No need to wait until we get back. If we can't get out tonight, we can roast it. White cat. It wanted to leave. It wanted to leave now. Hellion Vivian looked at it regretfully. Her eyes seemed to say, Sorry, I was just joking. I didn't think that the third prince would like you so much. White cat. Don't tell me that you want to listen to this man and roast me. Hellion Vivian sighed. He is now my patron. White cat. It shouldn't have trusted humans. However, Hellion Vivian didn't really eat the white cat for supper. She looked around and found out that they had to wait for the fog in the forest to disperse before they could get out. She started a fire on the spot and broke off a tree branch. She planned to hunt a rabbit and bring it back to eat. The weather in the forest was unpredictable. She didn't know when the fog would disperse, so not being hungry was her goal. She didn't bother to call out to Beligaju. Anyway, letting him sit by the fire, nothing would happen. That magical beast just left. It shouldn't be back so soon. No matter how smart Hellion Vivian was, she didn't know that the magical beast she was longing for had already been crushed by Beligaju, who claimed to have no martial chi and fed to his pet. Fire Chilin. When Bailey Jiaju was the only one left by the bonfire, Fire Chilin's satisfied voice slowly transmitted over from the contract space. Its tone was low and deep, revealing a bit of charm. A single man and a single woman together. Master, are you planning to make a move on that woman? Chapter 67. Beligaju's porcelain-like fingers paused as he glanced at it. Even if there's food, it won't be able to shut your mouth. Master, we haven't seen each other in so many years. As soon as you summoned me, you had me come to Spirit Forest. You even wasted a dragon core in exchange for the protection of a woman. Don't tell me you don't have any thoughts about her. The Fire Chilin's evil tone always made people think of elegance. Beligaju played with the jade thumb ring on his index finger as he smiled evilly. Before hunting, I have to give her some benefits, but this doesn't seem like your personality. You're so cold-blooded, but you're rarely interested in anyone. You even treat her as your prey. The Fire Chilin raised its eyebrows. I thought that only an ancient divine beast like me would be able to make you take a second look. Beligaju narrowed his eyes as a strong sense of oppression came from him. Cold-blooded? Even if it was the fire Cheelin, it couldn't resist its master's cold gaze. It coughed heavily and said, "What I mean is, you are such a noble person. How can you be so casually interested in an ordinary thing?" Huff, huff. Wanting to please a master was very tiring. The fire Cheelin turned around and wiped off its cold sweat. Beligaju slowed down his tone as his thin lips slightly curved. "A person who dares to use 10 taels of silver to buy an ordinary object of mine. Do you think I shouldn't be interested?" Using 10 taels of silver to buy master. The fire Cheelin was shocked as it almost choked on the bone in its mouth. Cough, cough. Where did this woman come from? She actually didn't know the difference between life and death. No wonder its master could pretend to be so abnormal. There was a reason behind it. In the time it wasn't here, such a fun thing had actually happened. It really didn't dare to believe it. Moreover, master, you just recognized the white cat that was following that woman. The fire Cheelin dutifully reminded him. Beligaju's eyes were indifferent, as if he didn't care about the other party. Bai Zai's descendant has the bloodline of an ancient divine beast, the only prince of the cat clan. It's probably because it was injured and its strength was greatly reduced that it revealed its original form and turned into a stupid cat. The white cat, achoo. Achoo. Hellion Vivian glanced at it. "Please, can you behave like a cat? Cats don't sneeze like this. Someone must be missing me." The white cat had an arrogant expression. "You have to know that my disappearance will cause panic in the entire Whitefin clan." Schwa. Hellion Vivian moved the branch in her hand and lifted up the white rabbit. She looked at the white cat standing on the rock and said coldly, "Maybe someone is scolding you." The white cat remained silent. Achoo. On the other side, the fire Cheelin shook its head and continued, "There seems to be signs of a contract between them. I really didn't expect that a woman could actually make the descendants of Bai Zai completely let down their guard against her. You have to know that they are the most cunning race. Also, my honorable master, you are wrong. In this world, I am the only divine beast with the ancient bloodline. As for my master, there will only ever be one, and that is you." Bailey Jiaju did not speak. He was dressed in an ivory white robe with a faintly discernible smile at the corner of his mouth. He was tall and slender, and one could faintly see the brilliance emitted from his body. This made all the beasts in the spirit forest feel an unprecedented throbbing. The feeling of submission to the strong that seeped out from the blood made them feel shocked. They didn't know what had happened, but they could feel that a king-like figure had come to the forest. However, as a human, Hellion Vivian didn't have this kind of understanding. Seeing that the rabbits were about done, she returned to the bonfire. With a beautiful twist of her dagger, the rabbit's skin bloomed like a flower and fell from the rabbit's body. Logically speaking, a young lady who lived in a big house all year round shouldn't be able to do this. Beligaju looked at Hellion Vivian's practiced movements, and his deep eyes became deeper. The white cat had been staring at him from the side. It wasn't sure if this man had martial chi, but because it wasn't sure, it felt that he was unfathomable and terrifying. Hellion Vivian also muttered, "That person has stayed here for so long, but no beasts have come to find trouble." The white cat coldly snorted. "What's so strange about that? Divine beasts generally prefer to be close to the strong. It is very difficult for a person with low martial chi to attract the attention of the beasts." It seems that this man wasn't lying. He really doesn't have any martial chi. Hellion Wei Wei followed suit and nodded. Only then did she completely dispel her suspicions towards Bailey Jiaju. How could this person and cat know that the reason why the beasts didn't approach wasn't because they didn't want to, but because they didn't dare? In the world of divine beasts, the hierarchy was very strict. The fire Cheelin didn't appear in front of the white cat, but it didn't mean that it didn't appear in other places. From the aura it emitted, the divine beasts that tried to approach here, before they even stepped into this circle, they completely fled. How would they dare to approach Beligaju? Unless they didn't want to live anymore and wanted to be swallowed by the fire Cheelin. However, they were thinking too much. The fire Cheelin had just swallowed a beast, and now it wasn't very hungry. It stayed in the contract space, guessing what its master would do next. After all, after eating, they would have to consider the problem of sleeping. Heh, in the true sense of a man and a woman alone. The fire Chelan smiled with a deep meaning, bringing out a bit of a devilish charm. Helly and Vivian had already finished roasting the rabbit. On top of it was smeared with strawberry juice, crispy on the outside and fragrant on the inside. Originally, when she handed it to Beligaju, a certain highness still wrinkled his thick eyebrows, but he still took it. The way he ate made Helly and Vivian feel that they weren't having a picnic right now, but were sitting in the palace eating dinner. The unexpectedly good taste made Beligaju think of the words of his tiger-like younger brother when he ate the first bite of the rabbit meat. He must choose someone who can cook. The meat she roasted seemed to be more delicious than the ones in the imperial kitchen, probably because of the method. The method she used was something he had never seen before. Beligaju's long and narrow eyes twitched, and his pair of deep and bottomless phoenix eyes were demonically cold. Done. After Helly and Vivian packed up the things, she spread the hay. It's getting late. Your Highness should also sleep early, good night. Beligaju looked at Helly and Vivian, who was about to lie down next to him, and his thick eyebrows that had just relaxed wrinkled again. How do I sleep? Just sleep like this. When Helly and Vivian used to do missions, she would often hide in the forest for several days, so she had long been used to it. Now that she saw Beligaju so resistant, she suddenly realized, Your Highness, don't worry, I'm not interested in you, so you can sleep peacefully. No matter how good his temperament was, he was still a homosexual. She didn't have the hobby of pouncing on a homosexual. After speaking, Helly and Vivian planned to turn around to rest, but didn't expect that the man actually pressed her wrist to the ground. Not interested, Beligaju looked at the woman below him who didn't care about him at all, and his chest inexplicably felt somewhat stuffy. Then who are you interested in? Morong Changfeng? Helly and Vivian didn't know why the always cold third prince would suddenly change his expression, and instinctively resisted his confusing aura, and coldly said, This doesn't seem to have anything to do with your highness. Could it be that he was the same as other people, and wanted to laugh at her previous infatuation with Morong Changfeng? Doesn't have anything to do with it? When Beligaju heard these 4 words, the light in his eyes completely turned cold. Without waiting for Helly and Vivian to sense the danger, she was brought into a cold embrace, and then, under her incomparably astonished gaze, a man's sandalwood scent enveloped her just like that without any warning. Chapter 68. Suddenly, the sound of a beast's roar resounded. The entire spirit forest began to shake and tremble. No one knew why the mythological beasts in the forest would suddenly become so violent. The originally tranquil celestial mountain was now filled with rolling stones. Helly and Vivian subconsciously wanted to stand up, but she didn't expect that he would be one step faster than her. He hugged her and dodged to the side. In those slightly narrowed eyes, there seemed to be a trace of anger. The roars of the magical beasts became louder and louder, as if they were fleeing on a large scale. Helly and Vivian looked at the large stones that rolled past them and frowned. That was close. So the reason why he suddenly pressed against them was because he sensed the danger. She thought that the third prince wasn't gay anymore, and Bailey Jiaju lowered his eyes and looked down at her. His voice was still indifferent, and no emotion could be heard from it. Only then did Wei Wei discover that her own fingertips were unexpectedly grasped in his hand. His fingers intertwined with hers, and the friction created a different feeling. Looking at the face that was so close to her, Helly and Vivian wanted to shake off his hand. Rumble. The earth shook again and stones rolled down. In order to avoid them, Helly and Vivian was forced to lean forward. The tip of her nose bumped into Beligaju's chest. The man's faint sandalwood scent immediately filled her mouth and nose. It was the same as the smell that occasionally came from somewhere in the forest. It was quiet and cold, very hard to ignore. Helly and Vivian thought that he would push her away. After all, the royal family was a man with mysophobia. She didn't expect that he would take the opportunity to hug her. His strong arms tightened around her waist, and his forehead pressed against her bangs. His beautiful peach blossom eyes slid past her eyes and landed on her messy neck. His deep eyes slightly deepened. The originally spacious earth suddenly became crowded. Her entire body was affected by the smell coming from his body. It was as if she was being held in his arms. The two of them were too close. Every time they moved, the sandalwood scent on Beligaju's body would follow. Hellion Vivian had nowhere to hide. The pair of indifferent eyes under his silver mask added too many things. They were as deep as an ancient well, as if they could suck her in. Hellion Vivian could clearly see the slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. His sexy thin lips carried an irresistible charm. In order to avoid any misunderstandings, the first thing Hellion Vivian did after the danger was over was to quickly stand up and observe her surroundings. It seems to be over. Beligaju saw that she couldn't wait to escape from his action, and the light in his eyes was dyed with ice again. In the future, remember to clean the corners of your mouth when you eat. Hellion Vivian touched her lips and raised her eyebrows slightly. Wasn't the third prince's topic jumping too quickly? No wonder he stared at her for so long. It turned out that her face was dirty. This was excusable. Hellion Vivian knew that there were a few symptoms of mysophobia. Staring at dirty things was one of them. But she really didn't expect that the third prince's illness had become so serious. Even when the earth was shaking, he didn't forget to observe the corners of her mouth. He was really dedicated. However, that beast cry just now was too strange. What happened in the spirit forest that could make so many mythological beasts run wildly? Hellion Vivian took a torch and jumped onto a tree. Standing on the branches, she looked from afar. That black mass of mythological beasts, there were at least 100 of them. Unfortunately, they were all running in the opposite direction from her. This made Hellion Wei completely dispel the idea of forming a contract with one. In the depths of the forest, in the fantasy space, the fire Qilin evilly raised the corner of its mouth. Master being so cooperative is really rare. Oh? Beligaju brushed off the dust on his clothes and said in an indifferent tone, "Why is it rare?" The fire Qilin rubbed its chin and said, "I remember that last time. The woman who threw herself into Master's arms was thrown out of the palace by Master. Why didn't Master resist this time?" "Because I suddenly felt." Speaking up to this point, Bailey Jiaju paused for a moment. A devilish coldness suddenly tainted his smile. "The feeling of having a new prey in my arms is not bad." The fire Qilin looked at that smile, and a chill suddenly appeared on its back. It still remembered how its master had treated it in the past, feeding it vegetables for an entire 36 days. Fuck, even the majestic fire Qilin had been abused like this. It didn't know how its master would raise that woman in the future. It couldn't be that he would eat and sleep with her in his arms. Thinking of this possibility, the fire Qilin couldn't help but raise the corner of its mouth. It really wanted to remind its master that even if that woman was black, she was still a human and not a pet. Hellion Vivian was still standing on the branches and looking at the magnificent scenery in front of her. Her eyes had a playful look. "Little White, you are also a divine beast. They are all moving. Why aren't you running?" The white cat laid on her shoulder and black lines slid down its forehead. "They are not moving. Then what are they doing?" Hellion Vivian pointed at the black mass of beasts under her feet and was somewhat curious. The white cat said in a low voice, "They are excited. They were using the unique method of divine beasts to celebrate. An incredible person must have come to the Wonderland Forest, but it was seriously injured and couldn't sense the existence of that person at all." The white cat thoughtfully lowered its eyes and a deep luster appeared in its silver-gray eyes. It didn't know how the people of the clan were doing right now. They must be looking for him everywhere. The white cat was right. The descendants of the Whitefin clan were indeed looking for him. The old king even brought the divine beasts to surround the entire White Academy for him, insisting that it was a student of the academy who had injured his most beloved son. Tu Su Feng wasn't here and Minister Jing had never dealt with this kind of thing before. His forehead was covered in sweat. He didn't know where the third prince had gone, and Eunuch Sun was also very busy. He had only gone to the spirit forest once and such a big mess had happened. If this was spread, where would he put his face as the superior compound's master? The Hellion Jiaoer stood beside Minister Jing and naturally saw his thoughts. Her beautiful eyes turned and were full of insidiousness. "Master, did you forget? Hellion Vivian is still in the spirit forest. Maybe the person who injured the cat palace was her. Based on that trash, Minister Jing disdainfully snorted. Helian Jiao air smiled and said word by word slowly. Master, in any case, it's impossible for her to come out again. Why don't you just push all the blame onto her, and also give the White Fin clan an explanation? Minister Jing stopped pacing and turned his head to look at the Helian Jiao. He stroked his white beard, and the same poisonous expression appeared on his face as the Helian Jiao. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Besides, he had long found that trash unpleasing to the eye. He might as well use her to shut the mouths of the White Fin clan. While the people on this side were still scheming, on the other side, Helian Vivian was leisurely looking at the night sky and whistling. Beligaju glanced at her and said indifferently, "If you are bored, come accompany this prince to play chess." Chapter 69. Helian Vivian glanced back and indifferently refused. "I don't know how to play chess." Beligaju's thick eyebrows wrinkled and with a unique elegance. "Zither, chess, calligraphy, painting. What do you know?" "Seems like I don't know any." Helian Vivian said in her heart that she was a new generation human from the 21st century who played with computers, racing, and firearms. Things like chess and ink were really not suitable for her identity. Beligaju held his forehead with one hand and looked helpless. "How did you get chosen in?" His in had a special flavor, with the unique sexiness of a man. However, Helian Vivian also wanted to ask herself how she was chosen. According to reason, her master should only be responsible for helping her sign up. "Regarding this question, Your Highness should ask the person who chose me." Beligaju's fingers paused for a rare moment, then he quickly smiled and said playfully, "You are right. When this prince has time, this prince will ask him why he chose you." Helian Vivian raised her eyebrows. From his words, did he know the person who chose her to enter the palace as a harem or what? Just as she was thinking, a sudden burst of pain swept through her entire body. That strange and tyrannical martial chi appeared again, but this time it was different. It brought along the white cat beside her. Helian Vivian tightly clenched her fists. Large beads of cold sweat slid down her forehead and hit the ground. Her body seemed to be carrying a whirlwind. Countless gases collided with each other, forming a huge, transparent barrier. In that barrier, an ancient diagram appeared. The white cat and Helian Vivian each occupied one side, emitting a bright light. The contract appeared. The Fire Chelan looked at this scene in shock. Until now, it did not dare to believe that the descendant of the White Fin clan would actually submit to a woman. A dazzling white light rushed into the sky and then quickly returned, gathering the human and cat together. All of this process only took a few seconds. However, the consequence of signing a contract with a divine beast was that both the human and the cat were unconscious. Beligaju's ink-black eyes, which were originally calm, rippled when he saw the white rose pattern on Helian Vivian's wrist. As a prince, he was very familiar with that kind of mark. The Phoenix Maiden that the 4 great clans had been searching for. They had never been willing to submit to others. Since more than 10 years ago, they had been planning to seize the throne. Especially when the priests predicted that there would be a Phoenix Maiden in this world, their ambition grew. They wanted to use the name of the Phoenix Maiden to threaten the royal family. Therefore, they arranged for their own descendants to infiltrate the White Academy one by one, to protect the Helian Jiao. This was so that when the Phoenix Girl appeared one day, they would be the first to see her. Who would have thought that the real Phoenix Girl was not the world's most talented girl who only had looks? Instead, he was the most inconspicuous good-for-nothing of the defense division. Master, obviously, Fire Chelan also saw the pattern that appeared because of signing a divine beast contract. Its eyes darkened. "I will kill." Fire Chelan did not say the words "kill her." Beligaju looked at it. That gaze was extremely cold, as if it could cut through people's bones. Fire Chelan's chest rolled, and its claws were in pain. "Master." It had not forgotten the fire in the Ghost Palace. The royal family's power was declining day by day. It was all because the current emperor was not good enough, and the retired emperor was old. Even though the deterrence was still there, the 4 great clans were not as docile as before. If it was not for the fact that its master had not fully awakened yet, their methods would not be enough. However, its current master did not even have his past memories. His strength had only recovered 1/10, not to mention awakening. That year, it spent a lot of effort to find its master. It had gathered all the sacred tools with great difficulty, all because it wanted to awaken its master who was sleeping in the human body. In the end, the stupid 4 great clans actually burned all the sacred tools. Not to mention that its master was seriously injured. It had no choice but to leave its master temporarily. This was because the master-servant contract had a strong backlash ability. Once the contractor's strength was lower than that of a divine beast, they would suffer an extremely strong backlash. Generally, the master who signed a master-servant contract with a divine beast would be stronger than the divine beast. Otherwise, they would not be able to resist the backlash from the contract. This was a principle that only divine beasts like them knew. That was why it left at that time. It was so that its master could survive and slowly recover. No one knew how excited it was when it was summoned by its master again, because that would mean that the real master would awaken soon. Although the woman in front of it did not show any danger, no one could guarantee that she would not be used by the 4 great clans in the future. It did not believe in the ridiculous divination of humans, but it would not allow anyone to hinder its master's awakening in any way. Qilin, I will say it again. She is my prey. As if it saw through Fire Qilin's thoughts, Beligaju's cold demonic voice sounded again. There was no longer the holy indifference in front of people. Instead, it was replaced by an oppressive aura that made even divine beasts tremble. Fire Qilin was the leader of divine beasts. Once it recognized its master, it could only obey. What's more, if it was not for its master, it would not exist.
Yes.
Fire Qilin lowered its head and glanced at the direction of the human and cat. They also signed a master-servant contract. Master, it seems that the legendary good-for-nothing is not a good-for-nothing. However, this was not good news for that woman. That's right, when humans subdued divine beasts, they would sign a contract with them. However, most of the time, they would only sign ordinary contracts. The master could command the divine beast, but the divine beast could not resist the master. If one wanted to sign this contract, they could do it when the divine beast was not paying attention. But the master-servant contract was not that simple. It was half dangerous. Unless the master had unpredictable martial qi, no one could subdue the cat race descendant of Bai Zhe. But it did not feel that this woman had much martial qi. Could it be that there was some kind of enormous power sealed in her body? But even if there was something sealed in her body, she could not just sign the master-servant contract so recklessly, because she could very possibly be devoured by the power of the descendant of Bai Zhe. Now, she was in an extremely dangerous situation. If she did not have a way to resist that power, then she would lose her life here today. Fire Qilin's eyes sank. It seemed that it did not need to worry that this woman would affect its master in the future, because today, it was very likely that she would not wake up again. Even if she woke up, all of her intelligence would be devoured and she would become a complete fool. Chapter 70. Just as the Fire Qilin finished this thought, it saw the unconscious Hellion Vivian suddenly frown. Her body trembled slightly as if she was in great pain. However, what it didn't expect was that its honorable master actually walked over with a cold expression. Without saying a word, he flipped his palm and grabbed Hellion Vivian's wrist. He inhaled and exhaled true qi and sent it into her body. The Fire Qilin's expression changed slightly, but it didn't say anything. Just now, its master's meaning was very clear. She was his prey, so her life and death were up to him. The gale gradually subsided. Beligaju's indifferent side profile was still perfect, but his eyes were flickering. 2 forces? He knew that the restless force belonged to the Whitefin clan. But what about the other force? It was so simple and huge. It was indescribably familiar. Beligaju carefully looked at the face of the woman in front of him. The depth in his eyes slowly rotated. However, in the next moment, this depth suddenly disappeared where his gaze landed. Gradually, it became meaningful. Hellion Vivian's entire body was soaked in sweat because of the pain. Somewhere on her chin, a small, almost invisible joint was exposed. It was completely different from her usual skin color. It was so white that it made people wonder if they were seeing things. Beligaju stared at her chin and slowly extended his slender fingers. The first thing he touched was her lips. Warm, soft, and the touch was better than he had imagined. It turned out that not all women could make him feel disgusted. Beligaju's deep eyes paused for a moment. His ivory-like fingertips slowly moved down, slowly cruising around her jaw. After his fingers touched that joint, Beligaju stared at Hellion Vivian even more deeply. Ripples of light flowed and his fingers moved slightly. The jet-black color followed his movements and gradually faded away. A stunningly beautiful face appeared in front of him just like that. The moonlight gently shone on her face. Her jet-black eyelashes were as thick as a crow's wings. Her delicate nose was straight, and her lips were red without any makeup. Without the contrast of her bright phoenix eyes, she still made people feel that she was dazzling. She seemed to be enduring the pain of being slightly drunk. Her eyebrows were slightly knitted, but she was more beautiful and mysterious than any woman he had ever seen. Looking at her, Beligaju didn't feel any discomfort. His mind naturally overlapped this face with those eyes that were sometimes smiling, sometimes angry, and sometimes angry. It was her. This was the real her. Only she dared to pinch his chin and say that he was unsatisfactory. It seemed that this little thing who didn't admit defeat was full of secrets. In the past, he had enough patience to hunt her down, so he didn't mind this. But now, for the first time, Beligaju felt that being beautiful wasn't a good thing. This kind of face should attract more covetous eyes. Beligaju's eyes deepened. He didn't know what method he used, but his fingertips moved left and right. Hellion Vivian's face turned even darker than before. Fire Qilin didn't have time to recover from the shock just now. It was confused by its master's actions. Master, don't you think that it would be better to keep a better-looking pet by your side? Now that it had turned into a black coal ball, it wasn't very beautiful. Fire Qilin regretfully shook its head. Beligaju didn't say anything. His expression carried a bit of satisfaction. At this time, Hellion Vivian was struggling to fuse the power in her body. With the experience of the first fusion, this time, she took advantage of the fact that the ancient power was fading away and swallowed it all in one breath. Soon, the fusion was complete. The pain in her body and the poison from the magical beast dissipated like smoke at this moment. Hellion Vivian was overjoyed. She was about to carefully check her martial chi. Suddenly, she felt an itch on her face. After the contract was completed, her external senses finally returned. As an ace agent, before she even opened her eyes, she instinctively threw a punch at him. This punch was also the most dangerous because this was an instinct that she had trained for many years. It was obviously a fight to the death. No one had ever been able to escape unscathed after injuring her, unless she didn't have the strength to fight back. However, what she didn't expect was that her punch with all her strength was like hitting cotton. It was soft and there was no reaction. What was going on? This wasn't right. Hellion Vivian was full of suspicion. She suddenly opened her eyes. When she saw the noble person in front of her, she realized that she wasn't on a mission, but in an ancient forest. Only, wasn't the third prince's posture a bit too strange? Could it be that there was something dirty on her face that he didn't like? Hellion Vivian subconsciously became alert. Your Highness, why are you so close? Beligaju was as indifferent as before. Of course I'm looking at you. If he wasn't looking at something dirty, then he was looking at her? Hellion Vivian was immediately struck by lightning. What are you looking at me for? I'm not that good looking. What was there to look at with such a black face? Wait, he couldn't have discovered something, right? Hellion Vivian suddenly froze. A bolt of lightning struck her from the top of her head to the soles of her feet. She didn't care about etiquette anymore. She immediately turned the dagger in her hand towards the fire, using the blade as a mirror. Good. Her face was still black. But, was it just her imagination? Why did she feel that she was even darker than when she entered the spirit forest? Hellion Wei silently twitched the corner of her mouth. She wholeheartedly thought about making more facial masks in the future to recuperate, so she didn't notice that behind her, Bailey Dongbing's playful arc, although very faint and very quick, was truly there. The Fire Qilin saw all of this and silently mourned for a certain woman. It never knew that its master liked dark-skinned women. It seemed that those ministers who sent women to the palace wouldn't have any effect. In this world, there really wasn't a second woman darker than Hellion Vivian. Can you put down the dagger in your hand first? When the white cat woke up, the first thing it thought was that Hellion Weiwei was going to commit suicide by cutting her veins. When it wanted to say a second sentence, it suddenly discovered something. Its eyes suddenly widened as it muttered in disbelief, "You actually really made a contract with me. I thought you wouldn't succeed." Contract? Hellion Vivian's eyes flashed. After connecting the dots, she seemed to have understood something. She faintly looked at the white cat. "Don't tell me that the power that almost took my life just now came from you." The white cat coldly said, "It was you who said that you wanted a contract with a divine beast. Our Whitefin clan's descendants are most particular about repaying kindness." "Then why didn't you repay me with your body?" Hellion Vivian flicked its tail. The white cat's entire body stiffened as a dark red color appeared on its face. This woman really wanted to marry it that much. Then when it saw father and the others, it would have them prepare a betrothal gift. The white cat lightly coughed twice, but it couldn't suppress the faint smile on its face. And this kind of scene fell into Beligage's eyes. Chapter 71. However, he didn't get angry. He only parted his sexy thin lips, the lines of which were extremely exquisite. That smile slowly blossomed, just like a seductive rose that bloomed in the night, revealing a faint trace of evil. Then he reached out his hand and pulled Hellion Vivian up. The man's pleasant smell of cold sandalwood immediately rushed into her nose. Hellion Vivian couldn't guard against it. Looking at his pair of hands that were so good that even women would be jealous, she was slightly puzzled. Didn't the misophobic royal family not like others touching him? Sure enough, after he helped her up, he let go. Then he looked at the white cat on the ground and said in a faint voice, "This highness is hungry." Hellion Vivian, didn't they just eat a roasted hare? How could he be hungry so quickly? Didn't they say that the royal family ate less? It seems that the rumors were not credible. Just like the seventh prince, that little bald head could eat a lot. "I'll go hunt another hare." Hellion Vivian planned to move after she finished speaking. In any case, she just happened to want to find a place where no one was around to see if she could wake Yuan Ming up. However, Bailey Jiaju stopped her. His deep red phoenix eyes were extremely beautiful when she looked closer. "No need, there are still cats here." The white cat's eyes tightened. Looking at the man with a faint smile, all the fur on its body stood up. Hellion Vivian's figure flashed and blocked in front of Beligaju. "You could eat it before, but not now. It has already been contracted by me and is my contracted beast. Your Highness should consider eating something else." "Only a contracted beast?" Beligaju's voice was very faint and cold. It was like ice melting into water, slightly oppressing her nerves. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. What else could it be? "You're right." Beligaju looked deeply at Hellion Vivian and slowly turned the black jade ring on his finger. "Besides a contracted beast, it can't be anything else." The white cat's body stiffened, and an indescribable sense of loss welled up in his heart. He had thought that she didn't have that kind of feelings for him. Fire Qilin looked at the crestfallen white cat, then looked at the tall and graceful figure. Was he overthinking? Why did he feel that the words his master just said weren't directed at Hellion Weiwei, but rather directed at that by Zay's descendant? As it turned out, Fire Qilin didn't think too much about it. He really did understand His Highness' style very well. Beligaju had always been devilishly scheming. He clearly knew how to get rid of a stray cat's unwanted thoughts. None of the methods were as thorough and intuitive as letting Hellion Vivian unintentionally reject it. Hellion Vivian didn't understand why they deviated from the original topic, but it didn't matter. After all, the third prince didn't mention the matter of eating cat meat anymore. She could be considered to have protected her little mythological beast. It was better to think about how to get through tonight. Hellion Vivian looked at the hay that had already disappeared. The ground was full of potholes, so it was impossible to continue sleeping here. Seeing that the fog had dissipated a lot, they might be able to take advantage of the night to leave. If the fog thickened again, it wouldn't be easy to break through the array. Moreover, The spirit forest itself was large, and her physical strength had already exceeded its limit. If a magical beast were to appear later, she wouldn't know how to deal with it. It was better to leave this place as soon as possible. Thinking of this, Hellion Vivian began to move, seriously calculating the distance. She didn't know why she had come so far. But one thing was certain, there was a problem with the map in her hands. As for who the person who wanted to harm her was, Hellion Vivian didn't need to think to guess. She just didn't know what kind of expression Hellion Jower and the others would have when they saw that not only did she not lose her life, but she had also contracted a mythological cat. Hellion Vivian evilly curved her thin lips. First, she commanded the white cat to trick a mythological beast that could camel people. Then, she collected everything that should be collected, and even extinguished the fire. This way, she could eliminate all traces and make the magical beast lose its sense of direction. After a short moment, the white cat returned, and behind it was a black wind horse. It was different from a normal war horse. The black wind horse had a pair of beautiful black wings, and its entire body was black. It was like the Devil's Mount in comics. Not only could it gallop on the ground, but it could also fly in the sky. But the white cat didn't know why, but the black wind horse seemed a little strange today. When it asked, it didn't say anything. On the contrary, as soon as Wei Wei saw that black wind horse, she coolly whistled and inwardly thought, if this thing also existed in the modern era, she would become Jita the thief. She could steal whatever she wanted, and could even fly around in the air. Without wasting any time, Hellion Vivian flipped over and pulled the reins, wanting to urge the horse to gallop. Suddenly, there was a heavy weight behind her. She widened her eyes and felt a warm sensation on her shoulder. A large palm was holding onto her. Hellion Vivian then remembered that the third prince who didn't know how to do anything was by her side. But wasn't this a little too intimate? His whole arm reached over and pressed on her other hand. That kind of posture was as if he was embracing her whole body into his embrace. Yet, he still had a cold and indifferent expression of abstinence on his face, which made Wei Wei's thoughts go a little astray. She felt that her heart was dirty. What's wrong? The man raised an eyebrow and elegantly and logically wrapped his arms around her slender waist. Hellion Vivian sighed. It seemed that she had indeed misunderstood. In front of a homosexual, she was only a protector, and there was no difference between men and women. Nothing. Hold on a little tighter. This horse will be a little faster. Hellion Vivian wasn't a petty woman. In special situations, she would treat them differently. The most important thing was to be able to get out of the fog before it rose again. Beligaju was very obedient as he leaned closer to her, and a devilish smile appeared on his face. Hellion Vivian felt the hot breath behind her ear. She had the illusion that her ear was being kissed. She shook her head, and with a wave of her whip, she brought the cat and the human out of the fog. Although there were a lot of magical beasts in the spirit forest, those in the outskirts were all low-level magical beasts. There were very few magical beasts with spiritual intelligence. Even if there were high-level magical beasts, there were only a few that were blessed with spiritual intelligence. So they often relied on their intuition and wouldn't take the initiative to attack those that were stronger than them. Thus, Hellion Vivian didn't encounter any difficulties along the way. At this time, the Fire Qilin had already listened to Beligaju's instructions and once again went into hiding. When it was summoned, it would naturally appear. Because if it returned to Beligaju's side now, not only would it not be of any help, it was very likely that it would once again attract the attention of the four great clans, thus alerting the enemy. Especially since Beligaju didn't intend to reveal himself so quickly. After all, he had another identity in White Academy, as a new student of the inferior compound. Chapter 72. You still haven't found the master? Eunuch's son was about to go crazy. He grabbed a scout and asked with a sharp voice. He hadn't rested for an entire night, so his eyes were bloodshot. Minister Jing, who had just finished negotiating with the Whitefin clan, came over and tried to comfort him. Eunuch's son, don't worry. The third prince will be fine. I have already sent the most outstanding students of the academy to find him. We will receive the news after daybreak. How can I be at ease? Eunuch's son stamped his left foot and said all the things he shouldn't have said in a panic. The master's body doesn't have the slightest bit of martial chi. He disappeared in the spirit forest just like that. How many magical beasts are there? It's already been a night. If we still don't find the master, he really didn't dare to imagine what would happen. We will definitely find him. Eunuch's son, don't worry. Minister Jing looked at the old eunuch who was spinning like a top. His mouth was still comforting him, but his heart was somewhat disdainful. So the rumors were true. The third prince, who was once known as the #1 young master under heaven, he couldn't be compared to before. A prince who didn't even have martial chi. No matter how powerful he was in the past, he was now nothing more than a waste. It was said that even the fire Qilin had abandoned him and hid in the deep mountains. If there was a chance, he really should talk to the air and let him go to Kunlun Mountain. Maybe he could contract the fire Qilin back. Minister Jing's wishful thinking was just in time. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a horse's hooves coming from a distance. A graceful, pure black shadow with a strength that seemed to be able to crush all the dust in its path opened its wings and descended from the sky. It stood straight in front of him. Even the experienced and knowledgeable Superior Institute elder couldn't help but be shocked by this scene. It was the most difficult to catch divine beast in the spirit forest, the black wind horse. How could it appear here? And the person riding it? Minister Jing's gaze moved up. When it fell on the small face with a bit of a ruffian, his pupils suddenly tightened. Hellion Vivian? She was actually still alive? Minister Jing's whole body shook, and he abruptly took a large step back. Back then, he had chosen to join forces with his disciple and participate in this plan because he believed that Hellion Vivian would definitely not be able to walk out alive. Because that map's final destination was a forbidden area in the spirit forest that no one dared to enter. Not only were there man-eating magical beasts there was even a fog that didn't disperse all year round. Even if it was a third-year student from the superior compound, they wouldn't be able to escape if they were trapped there. What's more, he was a good-for-nothing who didn't know anything. Therefore, in Minister Jing's mind, Hellion Vivian should have already become a corpse. And now, not only did she not die, she actually appeared in White Academy riding on a black wind horse. This made Minister Jing, in addition to being astonished, feel a strong sense of guilt. Because he was too guilty, Minister Jing didn't even see the person behind her clearly. He dragged a small servant over and told him to go find Hellion Jiaoer. Since Hellion Vivian was still alive, then he would make full use of her and let the Whitefin clan bring her back to be dealt with, so that if there were any changes in the future, the matter of him abusing his authority for personal gain would be exposed. Master Jing seems to be very surprised to see me appear here. Hellion Vivian nimbly flipped down from the horse and stood beside the black wind horse. She stroked the horse's head with one hand, and the corners of her mouth held a devilish smile. It was that kind of smile that made Minister Jing lose all confidence. He was even more determined to push Hellion Vivian out to block the muzzle of the gun. But following Hellion Vivian's movements, the other figure on the horse's back made him feel an indescribable tremble. Was it the third prince? How could the two of them be together? Eunuch's son also saw Beligaju. His old eyes were brimming with tears as he pounced over. Master, you finally returned. You really made this old servant worried to death. Beligaju's eyes didn't have the slightest ripple. He only sat on the horse's back and raised his eyebrows. The seventh prince, who wasn't even 5 years old, strode over with his small and thick legs. Eating a meat bun, he looked up. Brother, how did the two of you get together? What the seventh prince said is right. Minister Jing interrupted with a face full of worry. His words misinterpreted Little Bald Head's meaning. Your Highness should find an outstanding student to accompany you. This way, your safety can be guaranteed. If something were to happen to you, this old man would be worried to death. Fortunately, you both came out safely. As he spoke, he looked towards Hellion Vivian. Was it this black wind horse that brought you out? It seems that you haven't contracted with it yet. How could it be willing to carry you? Minister Jing could be considered as a senior who had stayed at White Academy for many years. He was very clear that these mythological beasts that lived in Spirit Forest were much more arrogant than magical beasts. As long as it wasn't a contracted person, they wouldn't allow anyone with strong martial chi to be ridden. Hellion Vivian shrugged her shoulders and turned to look at Beligaju. Her meaning was to say, "You're so smart, I'll leave it to you to deal with." Bailey Jiaju received her gaze and looked down at Jingwu Wang, who was standing below the horse. His pair of deep eyes were like waves of light, faintly cold and alienation mixed within. It seemed that at any time, he could emit an astonishing martial chi. Being looked at like this, Minister Jing's heart inexplicably trembled. Looking at Beligaju again, he saw that his thin lips were still pale. Although his black eyes were deep, no matter how he looked at it, he still had the appearance of someone who had been seriously injured. Minister Jing frowned and shook his head. He had seen wrongly just now, absolutely wrongly. Although everyone wanted to get the third prince's guidance, no one could change the fact that the third prince was already crippled. How could a crippled person have an aura that made him, a middle-stage golden-class person, tremble in fear? It must be because the third prince had been in a high position for too long. Just like yesterday, when he saw him for the first time, he also felt a chill run down his back. Minister Jing was thinking this in his heart when he suddenly heard Beligaju's indifferent voice open his mouth. In that voice, there was a trace of a demonically cold smile. Since the great master wants to meddle in this prince's affairs, this prince can say a few words in front of Imperial Grandfather on your behalf. He will let you enter the palace and cleanse your body. Then you can replace Eunuch Sun's position. In other words, that part of your body will be destroyed, and you will become a eunuch. Hearing this, Minister Jing's forehead suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. Hellion Vivian looked at his pale face and couldn't help but look at Beligaju again. She had to say, the third prince was really bad enough. For caddies to 1,000 tails, hitting the snake where it hurts. With just a few words, he was able to block Minister Jing until he was on tenterhooks, sending him into the palace to replace Eunuch Sun's position and so on. He was simply black-bellied to the extreme. No wonder, even though he had lost his martial chi, no one dared to be disrespectful to him. Because from beginning to end, the sense of danger that this man brought made everyone not dare to lower their guard. If he still had that amazing martial chi like before, the current power structure of the War Dragon dynasty would not be like this. However, the third prince was really smart. He knew that she didn't want people to know what happened to her in the spirit forest, so he didn't mention a single word. It seems that Great Master Jing doesn't have any more questions. Then I will leave first. Hellion Vivian indifferently swept a glance at Minister Jing, whose face had turned green. Just as she was about to leave, she was blocked by a group of guards who had appeared out of nowhere. Chapter 73. What was going on? Hellion Vivian's eyebrows hadn't wrinkled yet. The Hellion Jiaoer had already gracefully walked over. With a pained expression, she pressed down on her hand. Elder sister, this time you've really gotten yourself into big trouble. Gotten into trouble? What trouble did I get into? Hellion Vivian smiled evilly. She wanted to see what the Hellion Jiaoer was up to this time. As soon as you entered the restricted area of the spirit forest, news of the Cat Clan's prince being hunted came. Elder sister, there can't be such a coincidence in this world. Don't tell me you still want to deny it? Hellion Jiaoer's beautiful eyes stared at her, her face full of resentment. Hellion Vivian rubbed her chin and wantonly curved her thin lips. You mean to say that the one who hunted down the Cat Clan's prince was me? If it wasn't you, who else could it be? Hellion May also walked over and used a look of great guilt to stare at her. We all followed the team and returned the way we came. What about you? Only you didn't know where you went. Elder sister, I used to think that you were shameless, but I didn't expect you to have such a vicious heart. Hellion Vivian was just about to open her mouth to speak. Hellion Vivian, things have already reached this point, and you still want to quibble. If it's really like what they said, then no matter who your master is, you shouldn't take any chances. The Whitefin clan has already come knocking on our door. Even if this old man wants to protect you, it's useless. Minister Jing flicked his sleeves and angrily interrupted her. Do you know what kind of crime you've committed? It's a capital crime. Having heard what was said, Wei Wei thoughtfully glanced at Jingwu Wang. So it was like this. So it was because there was trouble and he, as the temporary dean, had no way to solve it. so he pushed her out to be the scapegoat. He clearly knew that once she entered the spirit forest, she wouldn't be able to come out, because the mastermind behind all of this was him and Helian Jiaoer. At first, she only thought of Helian Jiaoer. After thinking about it carefully, no matter how powerful Helian Jiaoer was, she was just a freshman. To be able to change the map of the spirit forest without anyone noticing, one had to be someone who was extremely influential in the academy. Otherwise, those teachers would have realized that there was something wrong with the map. As for this person, apart from Minister Jing, there was no one else. Now, he was playing the good cop and bad cop with Helian Jiaoer, just to make her speechless and admit her guilt. Heh, the cat prince? What a coincidence. She had just taken in one. Helian Vivian smiled shrewdly. Seeing her like this, Helian Jiaoer was afraid that something would change. Tears flowed from her beautiful eyes. Elder sister, ever since I entered the academy, I have been thinking of ways to change people's views of you. But this time, younger sister is truly powerless. I never thought that you would be this kind of person. After hearing Helian Jiaoer's words, a schwa sound was heard as the guards raised the spears in their hands. In the face of such an aggressive situation, not only did Helian Wei not panic, she slowly curled the corners of her mouth and said, "Sisters, from the beginning, all of you have been saying that I'm the murderer who hunted down the Cat Clan's prince. You didn't even give me a chance to explain. Now, I'll ask you one thing. If the one who killed the Cat Prince wasn't me, how do you plan to apologize this time? Slap yourselves a few more times?" You. Helian Mei had the most explosive temper. When she heard Helian Vivian mention the previous humiliation, she hated that she couldn't let the Cat Clan's guards take this slut away and dismember her into 10,000 pieces. Helian Jiaoer was clearly much more tactful than her. Within her eyes were tears of grievance. She righteously turned her head and said, "Master, this disciple knows that previously, it was because this disciple misunderstood eldest sister. That's why eldest sister was so confident. This time, this disciple won't say anything else. It's only that the Whitefin clan's people are still standing here. Right and wrong. I believe that they have their own set of beliefs in their hearts." Hearing this, Minister Jing seemed to have given up all hope for Helian Vivian. He heavily closed his eyes and tiredly waved his hand. "Helian Vivian, Master can't control you, this evil disciple. If you still have a conscience, you should follow the Whitefin clan's guard captain down the mountain early on. That way, you won't implicate these senior brothers and sisters of yours." What Master Jing said is right. A person should take responsibility for their own actions. Helian Vivian, if you're still a member of the Helian family, then don't discredit the Helian bloodline. That's right. Don't implicate everyone because of one person's debauchery, okay? The voices of condemnation were like a tide, sweeping over from all directions. They practically swallowed up Helian Vivian's entire body. However, Helian Vivian only tilted her head and straightened her collar. She evilly smiled. "Master Jing, everyone knows that I'm a good-for-nothing. A good-for-nothing without the slightest bit of martial chi. How could I possibly have the ability to kill a Cat Clan's prince? As a martial chi master, there's no way you don't know this point. And you, as the Academy's substitute dean, can't distinguish between right and wrong. You splash basin after basin of dirty water on me. You don't even do the most basic investigation, and you want to punish me for my crimes." As she spoke, she turned to look at the Zhang and Li family members behind her. "That year, my grandfather overturned the enemy and dyed the mountains with blood. That was the reason why you guys have your current glory. And you guys? Every single one of you is eager for me to die." Helian Vivian, having his intentions exposed, Minister Jing flew into a rage out of humiliation and loudly roared, "This old man has always treated you well, yet you're actually framing this old man like this. This is simply disgraceful." Helian Vivian playfully raised her eyebrows. "Framing? Master Jing, from the very beginning, you didn't take out any evidence to prove that the person who killed the Cat Clan's prince was me. If we're talking about framing, then it should be you framing me. Master, you don't need to be long-winded with her anymore. This unfilial girl simply won't accept your kindness." Helian Mei leaped over. "She's always been a hedonist and simply doesn't know what's good for her. If we're talking about evidence, doesn't she also have no evidence to prove herself? Moreover, at that time, we all came out of the spirit forest. Only she didn't follow the directions of the map. It's clear that she did something shameful. When Hellion Vivian heard this, her thin lips suddenly hooked up. Younger sister, who told you that I don't have evidence to prove my innocence? What? Hellion May was stunned. Even when Hellion Jiaoer heard this, her complacent smile also froze at the corner of her mouth. Impossible. She couldn't possibly have any evidence to prove her innocence. Since they dared to pin a crime on her, it was because they had already arranged everything in the academy. Even if the teachers were to detect something, they would remain silent and absolutely wouldn't testify for this slut. Then where did the evidence she spoke of come from? Xiaobai, come out. Hellion Vivian's voice was very light, but it revealed a chilling coldness. Come out and tell them what the truth is. Chapter 74. Who was she talking to? Everyone looked at each other in confusion. Looking at such a calm and composed Wei, Hellion Jiaoer's heart suddenly welled up with uneasiness. But before she could speak again, a cloud of white mist rose from Hellion Vivian's shoulder, slowly transforming into a white cat. When the students in the academy saw that white cat, they were still puzzled, but those White Fan clan guards standing at the side all widened their eyes, their faces full of disbelief. They all shouted out a name. Your Highness. What? This little cat was actually the White Fan clan's prince? How was that possible? It was so thin and small. It didn't even seem to have the ability to transform into a human. How could it be the White Fan clan's prince? After Hellion May heard that name, she clearly didn't believe it. Guard captain, you didn't get it wrong, right? It can't be wrong. That guard captain excitedly walked towards Hellion Vivian. Hellion Jiaoer wanted to stop him, but found that it was already too late, because that guard captain was already standing in front of Hellion Vivian. Looking at that white cat in fear and trepidation, Your Highness, how did you become like this? Even its true form was revealed. The white cat swept the crowd around, its voice cold. Who asked you to send troops? And who told you that she was chasing after this prince? If it wasn't for Vivian, this prince would have already lost his life to the magic beasts, and you still allowed yourself to be used by others to capture the benefactor of my White Fan clan. Simply stupid. The guard captain was scolded until his face was ashen. He didn't even dare to refute. And once the white cat's words came out, it completely washed away the suspicion of Hellion Vivian. Not only was she not the pursuer, she even protected the descendant of the White Fan clan's royal family. This fact was like a slap, slapping everyone's face. In that instant, Hellion Jiaoer's face was so pale that she was about to faint. She never would have thought that because of their invisible actions, Hellion Vivian would actually save the cat prince's life. Minister Jing's expression became even more flustered. He didn't know how to face those questioning gazes that were cast on him. Since Master Jing wants to punish me, then punish me. Hellion Vivian absent-mindedly smiled. Her back was very straight. Although she was wearing dirty clothes made of coarse cloth, and her small face was also covered in black ash, she gave everyone an indescribable feeling of oppression. I, Hellion Vivian, have also fulfilled everyone's wish. I will go down and accompany my Hellion family's millions of battle spirits. Hearing this, the crowd went into an uproar. They never thought that Hellion Vivian would be so ruthless. Even if Minister Jing wanted to mediate, he couldn't find any excuse. She wasn't asking him to punish her. She was clearly forcing him. Right now, he was the Academy's acting principal. If he made the slightest mistake, he would be stripped of this position. The elders of the 4 great clans had joined hands with great difficulty to get rid of Tu Su Feng. Only then did he have the opportunity to climb up. Now that such a matter had come out, it was already enough to give the imperial family a reason to call Tu Su Feng back. If Hellion Vivian continued to be so unforgiving, it was very possible that he would be accused of wrongly accusing a student. When that time came, don't even mention the position of acting principal. Even his title as the Superior Compound's Great Master could possibly be revoked. When Morong Chang Feng rushed over, he saw this scene. He set his gaze on the girl standing in the middle of the crowd. He always felt that her lonely and stubborn figure was somewhat dazzling. His heart, which had always been indifferent, seemed to suddenly jump. However, this didn't affect his judgment of the current situation. Minister Jing was a chess piece that Prince Morong's family had joined hands with the Su family more than 10 years ago to bury in White Academy. Now that he had finally made a name for himself with great difficulty, how could at such a crucial time, because of such a small matter, he was caught red-handed? However, Minister Jing really had nothing to say. Right now, he had entered a dilemma. No matter how he answered, it would be wrong. It was simply like hugging a hot potato. Hellion Vivian faintly smiled. This time, she should be able to thoroughly shut the mouths of those who had ridiculed her all these years. The atmosphere fell into a deadlock in an instant. All of the students seemed to be waiting for an answer. Wei, right now, the truth of the matter has already come to light. The royal family is also present, so they naturally have a judgment in their hearts. Minister Jing doesn't have the qualifications to make the decision. A steady and gorgeous tone interrupted this period of silence. Hellion Vivian looked back and saw Morong Changfeng standing behind her with an indifferent expression. His gaze fell on Hellion Jiaoer and Minister Jing's body, and then moved away. He didn't reveal any expression of protection. With a short sentence, he shifted the pressure that Minister Jing was under. Hellion Vivian looked at him with a heavy gaze. This was already the second time he had cut off her path of retreat. Since Lord Morong had spoken, everyone would naturally listen. This was the network of relationships between the upper class. When it came to a matter, the truth didn't seem to be important. He had once sworn an oath in the main hall that he would treat her like this, that he would never leave her. From top to bottom in the court, there wasn't a single person who didn't know that she, Hellion Vivian, was Morong Changfeng's future wife. And now, not only did he not become her support, he had instead been sharpened into a sharp sword by time, directly stabbing into her back, killing her until she didn't have a single piece of armor left. Everyone said that she was clinging to him, that she wasn't worthy of him, but no one remembered who had gone to the defense division 3 times just to be able to play with her. If at that time, it was he who had carried her to the top of the mountain, promising to give her the most beautiful scenery. But now, when he let go, she fell to the ground until her scalp bled. In order to consolidate his power, Morong Changfeng chose to protect Minister Jing, to protect Hellion Jiaoer, and to abandon her. Hellion Vivian's mouth carried deep disdain and disgust. However, Morong Changfeng misunderstood and thought that she was thinking of the past, so the gaze he looked at her with softened a bit. Minister Jing, who was at the side, knew that Morong Changfeng was giving him a way out, so he immediately opened his mouth and said, "What Lord Morong said is correct. This old man is only a teacher who teaches martial qi. How could I understand what punishment is?" After saying this, he looked towards Beligaju and said, "Let the royal family make the ruling." When Hellion Vivian heard this, she felt that there was no hope. The people of the royal family were the best at pretending to be confused. For this kind of small matter, Third Prince would naturally stand on Minister Jing's side. Who let that side have his chosen wife? And those aristocratic young masters and young ladies understood these rules the best, so there wouldn't be anyone who would open their mouth to speak for her. Carefully looking at it, it was only her who was fighting. Hellion Vivian hadn't finished thinking when she saw Beligaju jump down from his horse. The side of his face, which was wearing a silver mask, was exceptionally handsome in his gorgeous and colorful clothes. His eyebrows were deep, and his black eyes were deep, carrying a bewitching charm that made people fascinated. Chapter 75. Let this highness decide? Beligaju looked at her. His long and narrow eyes flashed with an indifferent light, as if this matter had nothing to do with him. Then it's a capital offense. Capital offense? Hellion Vivian clenched her hands. What a good third prince, to be so ungrateful. The rabbit meat she roasted in Spirit Forest was all fed to the dogs. He really didn't have a bit of conscience. Wait a minute. Hellion Vivian raised her eyebrows. He said capital offense. Why did he reach out his hand towards her? Don't think that because his hand was good-looking, she would forgive him. Wei Wei's eyes flashed with hatred as she lifted her head. Originally, She wanted to give the other party a slap, but instead, her entire body fell into that man's pair of eyes that were as deep as an ancient well. That pair of eyes seemed to carry a magical power, as if it could suck her in. Hellion Vivian stared blankly. Didn't he want to sentence her to death? Why did he want to help her up before she died? She thought that this third prince was too good at conducting himself. Before she died, he first gave her a sweet date to eat, so that she wouldn't resent him in the afterlife. Needless to say, she really was a little soft-hearted. However, he also underestimated her too much. Did he think that he could casually use a handsome man to make her yield? Eunuch Sun was simply driven crazy by this Miss Hellion. He lowered his voice and anxiously urged, "Miss Hellion, Master is helping you. Why don't you quickly pass your hand over? How much longer do you want to make him bend over?" Hellion Vivian didn't think that the third prince would help her. She reached out and placed her hand on the man's fingertips. The friction unexpectedly brought out a limp numbness. As if he disliked the dirt on her hand, he only held her hand for a moment before letting go. A handsome face that was both good and evil was untainted by worldly grace. His features were picturesque, and no emotions could be seen from him. She discovered that she really couldn't see through this third prince. Then, she heard him say, "As the acting principal of the academy, you actually took the lead to frame a loyal descendant. Naturally, this is a capital offense." His voice wasn't loud, but it was ice-cold, as if it could stifle other people's throats. Everyone felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts, as if their blood had been frozen. It was so quiet that they could hear the sound of flowing blood. The silence in front of the palace gate was frightening. It was as if even the air had stopped. Minister Jing's face immediately turned white. His entire body stiffened as he stood there. With a putong sound, he kneeled on the ground. Perhaps it was because he used too much force, so much so that the Hellion Jower shuddered all over. The sweat on her palms soaked the handkerchief in her hand. She looked at Beligaju and opened her mouth, but did not dare to speak. Murong Changfeng didn't think that things would reach this point. His handsome face clearly showed a trace of astonishment. He had never thought that the third prince, who had always been indifferent to the point of being mysterious, would actually interfere in this matter. Moreover, the moment he interfered, he gave them a fierce blow. Murong Changfeng wanted to refute, but he couldn't find an excuse. Framing a loyal descendant with such a big accusation, no matter how many people there were, it was still a capital offense. Hellion Mei was the only one who didn't know how to read people's expressions. No, it wasn't that she didn't know how to read people's expressions. It was better to say that she did not believe that the high and mighty third prince would help a piece of trash. "Your Highness, didn't you say something wrong? How could the person who should be sentenced to death be Master Jing?" Hellion Mei angrily pointed at Hellion Vivian. It's clearly this woman, harboring unfathomable motives. She saved the Cat Clan's prince, but didn't say anything. She just waited until the end to frame Master Jing. When the Hellion Jower heard this, she knew that things were bad. She stepped forward and hurriedly berated, "Younger sister, shut up." "Why should I shut up?" "Elder sister, look at this woman. Is she still the same as before?" "Not the same. She's simply a cunning snake. When we walk a little off course, she bites and won't let go. I don't know where she recently learned some bewitching tricks, even your favorite highnesses." Slap. Hellion Jower looked at the people all around her, gradually revealing looks of understanding and the man's eyes that were as cold as a pool. She couldn't hold it in any longer and ruthlessly slapped Hellion Mei's face. This slap not only made Hellion Mei stare blankly at once, even Wei Wei unexpectedly raised her eyebrows. Immediately after, she stroked the white cat. The corners of her mouth hooked up into an evil smile. The Hellion Jower's chest heaved up and down, as if she was suppressing her anger. She clearly knew what kind of man he was. Countless women had been rejected by him. For such a high and mighty person, what he hated the most was to be thought of and schemed against by others. So all these years, she had always been silent towards him. Even if she heard news about him, she would only smile like a well-bred young lady. Even when she found out that the third prince was coming to pick a consort, she didn't express her feelings to anyone. She pretended that she didn't care about him that much. When other young ladies came to ask her, She did her best to suppress the pride and joy in her heart. She didn't want to arouse his disgust. But now, Hellion May had blurted out her deepest secret in a moment of carelessness. She could almost imagine how those people who were on good terms with her and talked about the third prince would think of her. It was fine if this third sister was stupid, but she had also dragged her into the water. How could this not make the Hellion Jiaoer angry? You hit me? Second sister, you actually hit me. Hellion May's scream was indescribably ear-piercing. With her fiery temper, she was about to pounce on Hellion Jiaoer and grab her hair. She couldn't accept being slapped by her own sister in front of so many people. The Hellion Jiaoer saw that she didn't know how to restrain herself and became truly angry. She grabbed her wrist and said in a low voice, "Stop right now, Hellion May. Do you want everyone to see us sisters as a joke? If they want to see us as a joke, then so be it." Hellion May was full of anger. Hellion Jiaoer didn't want others to know, so she decided to fight to the death. Anyway, since we were young, I've always been a joke in front of you. Hellion Jiaoer paused. Why would you think that? Isn't that so? Hellion May shouted at the top of her voice. Compared to her usual self, she seemed to be even more shrewish. Without the slightest scruple, she completely exposed her ugly side in front of everyone. What kind of bad things? It's all because you ordered me to do them. I am your gun. Wherever you tell me to shoot, I must shoot. In the end, you got a good reputation, but I didn't get anything. Even grandfather likes you more. I really should let them see that you're actually nothing. Hellion May. Hellion Jiaoer trembled all over as she scolded in a low voice. What's wrong with you today? Hellion May sneered, her eyes red. Me? I was just woken up by your slap, you vicious bitch. Everyone was stunned by this scene. One had to know that this pair of sisters were usually lovable. The older one was gentle and beautiful, and the younger one was lively. Even the way she spoke was likable. But today, what was this? Hellion May was like a shrew on the streets. While everyone was shocked with their mouths wide open, only Beligaju glanced at Hellion Vivian beside him. His eyes were indifferent, deep, and cold like an ancient well. Chapter 76. For a split second, Hellion Vivian thought that she had been seen through. But after thinking about it again, so what if she was seen through? Her beautiful phoenix eyes slightly raised, giving off a ruffian appearance. She could take advantage of this opportunity to leave the impression of a vicious hedonist in the third prince, so that in the future, when the matter of selecting concubines fell on her, that wouldn't be good. As a result, Hellion Vivian patted the mythological beast on her shoulder, and with a voice that only the two of them could hear, she lightly laughed and said, "Little White, you did well." This highness didn't do anything. This highness only borrowed her sister's slap to make her speak out her thoughts, that's all. The white cat disdainfully looked at the two humans in front of it who were locked in a fight, and disgustedly brushed its whiskers. Hellion Vivian thought that this could kill two birds with one stone, but who would have thought that when Beligaju heard those words, the playfulness in his eyes actually became heavier, so much so that even the corners of his mouth rose into a devilish arc. This made Eunuch Sun doubt whether his eyes were playing tricks on him. Otherwise, why would his highness look at a swarthy woman in a different light? This is an illusion. It must be an illusion. And at this time, the usually innocent and pure Hellion Jiaoer had already had her hair pulled by Hellion May. The pain from her scalp almost made Hellion Jiaoer unable to control herself and want to curse. She was flustered and exasperated as she glared at Hellion May, knowing that there wouldn't be any results even if she continued to speak. So she simply raised the martial qi in her body, and with a bit of strength, she shook Hellion May a meter away. Murong Chongfeng's face was ashen. He didn't understand what had happened. This Hellion Jiaoer who had always followed Hellion May's instructions, how could she say something like this without considering the situation? He remembered that when he entered the defense division, this pair of sisters were clearly not like this. Looking at them now, it was simply as different as heaven and earth compared to that time. Could it be that this was their true nature? Murong Chongfeng's body stiffened. Hellion Jiaoer was a bit better. She just looked a bit more valiant than usual. That Hellion May was simply like a mad dog. If he allowed her to continue speaking like this, who knows what she would reveal, making him, who spoke up to protect them, Lu's face. Pong. Hellion May was heavily thrown onto the ground. The surrounding discussions entered her ears one after another. She shook her head, and only then did she gradually wake up. Recalling the words that she had just said, her expression immediately changed greatly. Her entire body was paralyzed on the ground. Why? Why did it become like this? She seemed to have been possessed by a demon just now and said all the things that she shouldn't have said. No. Hellion May hugged her head and shrieked involuntarily. Who is it? Who framed me? I don't. Over. Hellion May's face showed despair, her throat filled with bitterness. She simply didn't dare to look at the people standing around her. What's more, there were still young masters from various families standing here. She was so barbaric just now. In the future, she was afraid that she would never be able to marry again. When Hellion Jiaoer saw this, tears also gushed out. When had they sisters ever been in such a difficult situation? She didn't believe that this matter had nothing to do with Hellion Vivian. She also knew that at this kind of time, they couldn't be strong anymore, they must be soft. Only then would they be able to attract other people's sympathy. Therefore, Hellion Jiaoer didn't care about former enmity. She reached out and hugged Hellion May. Turning her head to look at Morong Changfeng, she weakly called out, Lord, younger sister must have been under some kind of evil curse. That's why she went against her heart and said those unbearable words. Hellion Jiaoer beseeches Lord, first let us sisters go down to rest. Hellion May going crazy like this was also good, although she also didn't want to see her own younger sister lose all standing and reputation. But this way, she would have a way out. Otherwise, Third Prince might drag her and Jing Wuwang down together. Right now, she could take advantage of the panic to muddle through this matter. However, Hellion Vivian was never a person who would let go of a loss. She looked at Hellion Jiaoer, her tone indifferent. Second younger sister, you want to wrongly accuse me and then leave? Hellion Jiaoer's arms stiffened. Her beautiful eyes turned red. As if tears were dripping down, she glanced at Hellion Vivian. Looking from afar, people who didn't know would think that she was the one who was wrongly accused. However, everyone knew that this wasn't the case. Therefore, her trick of pretending to be pitiful was completely useless. Even Morong Changfeng didn't speak up for her. Hellion Jiaoer knew that this time, she had to admit defeat. Her eyes flashed with malice, her small face slightly lowered, and she faced Hellion Vivian and bowed. Her lower jaw tightened. Eldest sister. This time it's younger sister's fault. Younger sister shouldn't have wrongly accused you without investigating anything. It's good that you know your mistake. Hellion Vivian smiled. What I'm afraid of is that younger sister's heart is still unconvinced. Otherwise, why would you be so unwilling to bow? Hellion Jiaoer firmly pinched her fingers, her waist bent again, and even her knees bent to the ground. However, her face still maintained a faint smile. Is older sister satisfied now? Whether I'm satisfied or not isn't important. The most important thing is younger sister. Hellion Vivian curved her thin lips, pausing after each word. Are you convinced? She did it on purpose. She deliberately emphasized the last 3 words. Hellion Jiaoer was so angry that her entire face was distorted, but she had no choice but to lower her head by an inch. Her lower jaw trembled as she said, convinced. After saying these 2 words, the handkerchief in Hellion Jiaoer's hand was stained with a layer of blood, making her use this kind of posture to curry favor with Hellion Vivian. It was simply more unbearable than killing her. She would rather slap her own mouth than be looked at like this. Look at her groveling while Hellion Vivian took all the glory. Not only this time, she even threw in her younger sister's reputation, as well as the lifeline that the Su family used to bribe the academy all year round. If grandfather knew of this matter, he would certainly fly into a rage. Also, there was Third Prince. How could she let that man see her in this kind of inferior position? All of this was all because of Hellion Vivian, that slut. Hellion Jiaoer hated that she couldn't kill her right now, but she knew that she couldn't do that. Therefore, she could only bite her own thin lips and let those guards take Master Jing Wang away. She must show that little slut a bit of her power, no matter what method she used. She couldn't wait until the martial chi competition. and she couldn't wait until after the consort selection. She wanted that little slut to die now. Hellion Jiaoer's eyes were floating, overflowing with a burst of poisonous intent. Hellion Vivian didn't care at all. The Whitefin clan was a mythological beast that could see through human thoughts the best, not to mention that Little White was a prince. Of course, he was aware of the resentment emitted from Hellion Jiaoer's body. He coldly reminded Hellion Vivian, if this king was you, this king would directly kill her. What's the point of making her apologize? What's the point of kneeling? What a waste of time. You don't understand. The most painful thing for humans is not death, but to make them lose what they rely on the most for survival, such as power, such as face. She believed that just now, Hellion Jiaoer must have felt even more unbearable than death. For so many years, Hellion Vivian had always lived like this. She suffered all kinds of humiliation, and her life was worse than death. What she wanted had never been to cut off all ties with a blade. All the things that should have belonged to the Hellion family. Whatever those people took from her in the beginning, she wanted to take it back bit by bit. Chapter 77. Outside White Academy. After Su Jiacheng heard the news of Hellion Jiaoer's humiliation, he and Hellion Guangyao rushed over together. Grandfather, father, I really can't stand that trash anymore. Hellion Jiaoer completely lost her patience. Her eyes viciously stared at the corner of the handkerchief. I want to remove her name from the Hellion clan. Su Jiacheng listened to his granddaughter's words and said, I used to think that a trash wouldn't be able to stand up to any waves. I didn't expect that she would accidentally destroy all the relationships I've worked on for so many years. Since she doesn't know what's good for her, then let her suffer. Guangyao, you go and handle this matter. I reckon that the remaining ambitious people in the Hellion clan have long since stopped wanting a trash to stay in the clan and have her hands and feet tied. Hellion Guangyao nodded, but as sinister as he was, he discovered a suspicious point. That vile spawn and the third prince both don't know martial qi. How in the world did they escape from such a dangerous place like Spirit Forest? Don't tell me that vile spawn is hiding something from us? What could have happened to her? Hellion Mei covered her bruised forehead and disdainfully shouted. She was just lucky to save the Whitefin clan's prince and let him take her out of the forest. Otherwise, with her three-legged cat's martial arts, she would have died in Spirit Forest long ago. Mei, you pay attention to your tone and identity. Hellion Guangyao had long been angry with her. Today, in the court, because he had such a daughter, he lost all face. Now, the entire capital knew that he, Hellion Guangyao, had raised a brute. After so many years, you haven't made any progress at all. Today in the academy as well. It's fine if you lose face yourself, but you even exposed your second sister. If that brain of yours doesn't open up, father will write a letter to the headmaster to have you quit school and get married. Hellion Mei felt wronged after being scolded, but she didn't dare to refute it all. Everyone knew that a girl who had been expelled from school simply wouldn't be wanted by anyone in the capital, unless she married those old men in their 70s or 80s. How could she, who had always been proud and arrogant, accept that? Just thinking about that scene made her feel disgusted. Usually, at this time, Hellion Jiaoer would have already spoken up for her. But now, Hellion Jiaoer actually sat to one side and calmly drank her tea. The corners of her eyes already showed annoyance towards Hellion Mei's constant stupidity. However, Hellion Mei did not notice it. She only wanted to persuade Hellion Guangyao to calm down. No one noticed that the thing that Wei Wei did today, the goal that she wanted to achieve the most, was already beginning to bear fruit. If you want to destroy an organization, you must first let them have internal disagreements. Even though Wei Wei didn't see this scene in the carriage, but as long as it was a normal person, they wouldn't place an unsafe factor who knew everything about them by their side. In the past, when Hellion Mei and Hellion Jiaoer lived together in the general's residence, they were not conspicuous. Now, they both came to the White Academy. All the contradictions would be highlighted bit by bit. One was at the superior compound, receiving countless adoration. Although one was not bad, her treatment was not as good as the other. Hellion Mei was not a kind person. It would be strange if she was not jealous of Hellion Jiaoer, and Hellion Jiaoer was not aware of the danger. When she came to the overcrowded environment, she would realize that sometimes having a sister who understood all her secrets was not a good thing. When the time comes, I don't need to do anything. They can fight each other like dogs. Hellion Vivian leisurely whistled. She returned to the inferior compound in a very good mood. Too many things had happened in the past 2 days. Hellion Weiwei was finally able to relax when she finally returned to her own territory. She simply threw away her shoes and outer garment and lazily sprawled on the wooden table. She swallowed the dragon pill that she earned from Beligaju and started to cultivate her breathing. She wanted to try to wake Yuan Ming up, but found that the other's mental state showed signs of excitement. Hellion Vivian realized that Yuan Ming's deep sleep might not be a bad thing. Then let him sleep. Maybe when he wakes up, there will be a pleasant surprise. Hellion Vivian exerted force in her palm and absorbed the essence of the entire dragon pill into her body. In an instant, the air around her started to rotate. Even the ancient scrolls on the table started to churn incessantly, making bursts of noise. The white cat that was crouching at the side and basking in the sun straightened its body. Its eyes flashed with amazement. From the beginning, it knew that she was not simple, but it never thought that she would be a manipulative martial artist. This was not only in the Dragon War Empire. Even on the other side of the sea, it was impossible to find a second manipulative martial artist. This kind of martial artist was either a waste who did not know anything, or a shocking genius who could control all martial chi. It was very clear that its master belonged to the latter. Before, its clansmen were still questioning why it chose a well-known waste in the capital as its master. In order to help her keep the secret, he did not tell them the real reason. He only said that it was to repay a debt of gratitude and that he would return after a period of time. And the people on this side of White Academy did not even know that she already had her own divine beast. He just heard the people from the superior compound say, in the martial chi competition later, that one from the Hellion family will definitely lose especially miserably. Don't even mention whether or not she can be chosen as a consort. Third Prince originally liked clean and pure girls. As for her, she already had her marriage annulled once. Basically, she already has no chance. What's more, retired emperor will not let a waste enter the family. Heh. She did not know what those famous young ladies who talked about her behind her back would think after seeing this scene. The white cat narrowed its eyes and lowered its expression. What's more, when signing the contract, it already felt that in her body, other than her original martial chi, there was also a very simple and thick aura. If it didn't guess incorrectly, that must be her contracted demon god. A contracted demon god with an ancient aura, who could it be in the end? Just as the white cat was about to open its mouth to ask Hellion Vivian, a cold and noble figure like the moon appeared at the side of the door. That man was very handsome. His black hair hung down on his white clothes, giving people a feeling of abstinence that could not be profaned. It was obviously the first time it saw this man, but it always felt that there was an indescribable feeling of familiarity. What in the world was going on? The white cat moved its whiskers and subconsciously became vigilant. Little White, be good. He is my little brother. Hellion Vivian stroked the white cat's head and lazily propped up her chin. Facing Beligaju, she raised her eyebrows. Why did you come? You don't have money to take today. The Beligaju who took off his mask for the first time felt that the White Academy's green and white clothes were not bad. It could cover up all the aura on his body. What's more, he wanted to appear in front of the world in whatever manner he wanted. For example, the current Beligaju had a trace of a demonic aura. Without any misgivings, he simply put one hand on the table and slowly pressed towards her. Chapter 78. He slowed down his tone, his words charming. I'm not here to collect money. I'm here to care about the safety of my patron. I heard that you were almost taken away by the Cat Clan as a criminal. Look, the royal family was so good at pretending. Hellion Vivian yawned, not retreating but instead patting his head. Don't worry, your big sister isn't that easy to bully. They were all beaten back by me. Is that so? Beligaju looked at her with a meaningful gaze, then casually asked, I also heard that you and the royal family were alone in the spirit forest for an entire day? Hellion Vivian made a sound of acknowledgement, then suddenly remembered something. Grabbing his sleeve, she said, "If you didn't mention it, I would have forgotten. Would you believe it? He was actually the one below." "What?" Beligaju's eyes froze. Hellion Vivian explained, "That's right. Isn't there a difference between top and bottom? I really didn't expect that the imposing third prince would actually be willing to be the one below." "Be the one below? Good, very good." Beligaju's bewitching thin lips had an unprecedented chill. In the future, he would let her know whether he was the one above or the one below. Surprised, right? When I first guessed it, I was also quite surprised. Hellion Vivian didn't notice his current expression. She was currently rummaging through her own things. She folded the previously washed handkerchief neatly and placed it into a small yellow box. Shadow, who was hiding outside, had already heard until his legs were about to go soft. Cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. He wanted to make some noise to signal Hellion Vivian to stop talking. However, Beligaju only raised his head and glanced towards the window. Shadow's four limbs immediately stiffened, and he silently retreated back to his original position, continuing to watch Hellion Vivian court death. Beligaju retracted his gaze and fell on Hellion Vivian's hand. His thin lips hooked up a bit. "You seem to treasure this handkerchief very much." "Of course it's a treasure," Hellion Vivian said in a serious tone. "This is a handkerchief used by the third prince." "Oh?" Beligaju lowered his eyes. There was a little light in his eyes. Seeing that she cared so much about his handkerchief, he would let it go. Hellion Vivian pressed the box and muttered, "I heard that the handkerchief he used is very precious. After we pack it up and sell it to the ladies of other families, we should be able to get a good price. At that time, you want to sell it?" Beligaju's fingers paused, and he slowly interrupted her. Hellion Vivian didn't know if there was something wrong with her hearing, but she felt that there was a trace of displeasure in that voice. "Yes, what's wrong?" Beligaju's eyes were slightly cold. An ice-cold aura hit her in the face, but there wasn't the slightest trace of emotion in his voice. Nothing. It seemed that his prey still hadn't learned to be obedient. It was time to dismantle her claws. Beligaju smiled, bringing out a bewitching chill. It made Shadow tremble from head to toe, and he almost fell down from the tree. Ever since Master became acquainted with this Miss Hellion, he had become more and more fond of smiling. This really wasn't a good thing. Because His Highness was a person, the more bewitching his smile, the more it represented that his mood was very good. No, good. Does this Highness look like the one below? When only Beligaju and Shadow were left, he slightly raised his thick eyebrows and asked the servant following behind him. Shadow's scalp went numb. He immediately shook his head and said in a small voice, "Your Highness, even if you were willing to lie down, no one would dare to press you down." "Is that so?" Beligaju slowly turned the ring on his finger in a circle. His delicate thin lips slowly raised. "However, since she likes this position, if this Highness doesn't satisfy her when the time comes, wouldn't that be too heartless?" Shadow's back stiffened. What did he mean by "since she likes this position"? "Your Highness, the position you're talking about shouldn't be the position this subordinate is thinking of, right?" Beligaju leaned against the ancient tree. He didn't speak again. Instead, with a turn of his fingertips, a silver mask was put on his face again. It perfectly covered that absolutely beautiful face, only revealing those deep eyes and those beautifully curved thin lips. When he thought that not long later, he would be able to remove that little fox's claws and have her sit on his body, allowing him to do as he pleased, those deep eyes deepened. His slender fingertips brushed past his thin lips. The man's smile became more and more bewitching. He would personally tell her how he had to submit to others. A light breeze brushed past. In the blink of an eye, under the ancient tree, there was no longer that green and white robe like moonlight. West side of the academy. Hellion Vivian received news that she was to go down the mountain. The clan elders had an important matter to announce. At the beginning, Hellion Vivian didn't know why these people who were rarely seen in 10 years would suddenly think of her today. After she walked into the clan's hall, she understood. They were here to take revenge for Hellion Jiaoer. She wanted to see what they wanted to do with her. Hellion Vivian crossed her arms and sneered. Those mocking eyes made Hellion Guangyao, who was sitting on the main seat, inexplicably tremble. When he came back to his senses, he slammed the table fiercely. His face was filled with unprecedented rage. This is your attitude? Doing things your own way? Not showing respect to your elders? Hellion Guangyao's eyes were gloomy. His voice carried disgust. If I had known that you would be this kind of disaster, I would have thrown you out without caring about the sentiments of the past. Right now, all the elders in the clan are present. Everyone has seen what you've done at White Academy during this period of time. Hellion Wei, you better remember this. It's not that I, your father, don't want to protect you. It's just that you're too much of a spoiled brat. I'm also getting old. I don't want to see that gentle younger sister of yours ruined by your hands like this. As he spoke, Hellion Guangyao looked at the 4 elders sitting at the side. Elders, I presume you've already heard about the cause and effect of this matter before you came. Because of a misunderstanding, this wicked girl made her 2 younger sisters kneel down and apologize to her. What kind of vicious thoughts is this? Just thinking about it makes this old man feel ashamed. When the 4 elders heard this, one after another, they put down the porcelain cups in their hands. One of them laughed mockingly. This old man once wanted to drive this good-for-nothing out of the clan as soon as possible, so as to avoid losing our Hellion clan's face. Look at it now. She even dares to bully Miss Jiao. Miss Jiao is someone who will participate in the martial chi competition soon. She was also personally chosen by the retired emperor as a beauty. This good-for-nothing made her suffer such a big grievance. This is simply bringing shame to our Hellion clan. Another elder took over and said, Someone come, beat this good-for-nothing with 100 boards and throw her out of the residence. This kind of person can't be allowed to stay. Chapter 79. As the elder spoke, he wanted to stand up, but at this moment, Yuan Ming, who was hidden in Hellion Vivian's body, suddenly opened his eyes. Suddenly, with a thump, that elder inexplicably knelt on the ground. Hellion Vivian naturally sensed that Yuan Ming had awoken. The corners of her mouth slowly curved up. Looking at that stupefied elder, she said, Niewalin, you're an elder who was single-handedly raised by grandfather. If it weren't for grandfather, right now you're nothing more than a poor boy with no power and no influence. Now you're talking to me? Do you have the qualifications? As she spoke, her gaze swept inch by inch across those elders who were gasping for breath because of anger. And you guys, which one of you haven't received grandfather's kindness, yet now you're allying with outsiders? For your insignificant benefits, you want to drive me out. You're really putting on a good show. The elders reached out and pressed their hands on their chests, so angry that even their fingers were trembling. Hellion Vivian's words seemed to have opened up the deepest and dirtiest shameful heart in their hearts. They indeed did receive the Defense Division's kindness. But this kind of kindness made their hearts feel stifled. Everything had to be done according to Old Man Hellion's mood. It was simply too much. That's why when Old Man Hellion passed away, they quickly stood on the new clan leader's side. Even though Hellion Guangyao was acting as a substitute for the underage Hellion Vivian to manage the Hellion clan, they'd rather the clan leader always be Hellion Guangyao. That way, not only could they act like tyrants, they could also completely not care about whose mood they had to look at. When they were bored, they could even use Hellion Vivian as a joke to make fun of. Who let her be a good-for-nothing? The feeling of stepping on Old Man Hellion's beloved daughter was very comfortable. Hee. Wei Wei had seen a lot of people. How could she not know what these people were thinking? She curved her thin lips and smiled faintly. Within the ridicule, there was a bit of understanding. Sometimes, people really shouldn't promote people. Who knows, maybe one day, great kindness will become enmity. Respected father, don't you agree? Enough. Hearing Hellion Vivian even mention himself, the deep sense of humiliation made Hellion Guangyao want to strangle her to death. The elder who was kneeling on the ground was even more furious. Some people are really too much. Just a little bit of kindness, and they want to say it every day. You even slandered our character. Patriarch, you must seek justice for us. Hellion Vivian, hearing the elder's words, Helian Guangyao took a deep breath. If you admit your mistake now, it's still not too late. Otherwise, don't blame your father for being impolite. He thought that his words would scare Helian Vivian into restraining herself, but nothing happened. She just looked at him with a mocking smile, and that smile made him feel inexplicably nervous. Good. You really are a tough nut to crack. Helian Guangyao was so angry that he laughed. Since it's like this, from today onwards, you can get lost. The Helian clan doesn't want a good-for-nothing like you. When Wei Wei heard what was said, she smiled very, very slowly. This is your purpose, right? In order to avenge that beloved daughter of yours, you unexpectedly joined hands with all the elders to expel me from the clan. However, don't forget, according to the Helian clan's rules, as long as it's a descendant of the Helian bloodline, even if they're expelled from the clan, they can still pass through the selection process and come back again. So much so that they can control the entire clan. Helian Guangyao, you stole my family's inheritance, cut off my escape route, and thought that nobody would know. Heh, let me tell you, one day, I will come back, kill your left arm, and break your right arm. As if she didn't hear the gasps coming from all around her, Wei Wei didn't even look at Helian Guangyao's ashen face. She flung the Helian family's badge on the ground and casually turned around with a wicked smile. She didn't even pay attention to those stupefied elders. Bang! Helian Guangyao kicked the chair in front of him and sent it flying. He didn't seem to feel the pain in his hand, his gaze firmly fixed on Helian Vivian's back, his lower jaw tight. A good-for-nothing actually had thoughts of controlling the entire clan, simply an idiot's dream. Elder Nya. Helian Guangyao coldly snorted and extended his hand to help the elder up. What happened just now? Elder Nya didn't care and waved his hand. Don't know what kind of despicable method that girl used, but she actually made this old man's legs go soft. It shouldn't be that she cultivated martial qi, right? After hearing Helian Vivian's words, some people felt uneasy. Elder Nya sneered. She cultivated martial qi? That kind of good-for-nothing? You all saw it. Her body didn't have the slightest fluctuation of martial qi. What martial qi could she cultivate? Besides, with Miss Jiao Air here, even if that good-for-nothing had martial qi, even if she cultivated for another few hundred years, she still wouldn't surpass Miss Jiao Air. Mentioning Helian Jiaoer, Helian Guangyao confidently smiled. I saw Jiao Air 2 days ago. What's worth being happy about is that she advanced again. Again? Advanced again? The elders opened their eyes wide in disbelief. It hasn't even been a year, and Miss Jiaoer actually advanced again, worthy of being called a genius among geniuses. Helian Guangyao modestly waved his hand. In a few days, it will be the martial qi competition. At that time, retired emperor will personally watch the competition at the Phoenix Pavilion. That's why she's so hard-working. She wants to win. After listening to these words, the elders felt that they were on the right side. Compared to that good-for-nothing, Miss Jiao Air had a much better future. What's more, they already received news that Miss Jiao Air was very likely to be the Phoenix Girl. As long as they could firmly hold on to this ship, they would definitely have a meteoric rise in the future. As for that good-for-nothing, they reckoned that she would be oppressed in the preliminary competition. She was too weak to withstand a single blow, simply a joke. However, they didn't know in the slightest that in this world, there was a kind of martial artist who, even without the slightest element of vitality, could still manipulate the wind, water, rain, and dew of the world. This kind of martial artist was hard to come by in 100 years, even more powerful than a gold-ranked martial artist. And Helian Vivian just so happened to be this kind of martial artist. Not only that, but there was also a demon hidden in her body, the invincible scourge of that year, Yuan Ming. Sooner or later, they will regret it. Yuan Ming finally returned. His momentum was even more overbearing than before. Especially that move just now was really beautiful. The white cat's ears perked up as it looked at the faintly discernible figure behind Helian Vivian. Its eyes shook. It's him. Oh, I forgot to introduce you guys. Little White, this is Yuan Ming. Yuan Ming, this is Little White. Helian Vivian didn't care at all as she stretched her body, not at all like she was driven out of the house. The white cat's mouth fiercely twitched. How many times did he have to say, He was called by Bai Zai's descendant? Yuan Ming pushed his hair back, revealing a demonic appearance. No wonder when I was sleeping, something barged in. So it was you. The white cat's face was cold, completely unwilling to talk to this demon who once had a grudge with their Bai Zai clan. On the contrary, Hellion Vivian's finger brushed across her thin lips, evilly smiling. Since everyone is here, then let's go let those stupid people bleed. Chapter 80. The sky gradually darkened, and the lanterns were lit. From afar, it was a flourishing and exquisite scene of lanterns. The crisscrossing streets were rendered very beautiful. At the corner of the street, a beggar who was originally curled up was awakened by the sound of silver hitting a bowl. As he raised his head, the evening light fell, and he saw a woman standing against the light with a white cat on her shoulder. The corners of her mouth curved into a smile. I'll give you 10 taels of silver. Take off the clothes on your body and sell them to me. There was actually such a good deal in this world? This was simply picking up a big meat pie for no reason at all. The beggar promptly got up and took off the tattered robe on his body in a few moves. The woman smiled again, and with a bend of her index finger, she flicked the 10 taels of silver into his broken bowl. Then with a hook of her hand, she put the robe on her shoulder. Her movement of putting on the clothes was particularly fast and particularly handsome. When she turned her head again, the tattered robe fell. The woman turned around and transformed into a genuine little beggar. She reached out and straightened the collar of the robe. Then with her long legs, she walked out of the dark alley. The corners of her mouth curved into a smile as she walked towards the nearby martial arts aristocratic family, the Nye family. The guard outside the door saw many beggars who came to beg. His eyes flashed with disdain as he waved his hand. Go away! Go away! Stay where it's cool. This isn't a place you can come. That beggar didn't get angry and only smiled. The breeze blew his black hair, and with a turn of his body, the wind from his leg was swift and fierce, like a knife that pierced the bone. Pung! The Nye family's door was forcibly cut open by the wind from his leg, creating a large hole. The guard at the door was thoroughly stunned. He foolishly looked at the beggar who was walking forward as if there was no one around. In the end, he loudly shouted, "Set up the formation! Quickly set up the formation!" Someone came to smash the place. In the capital, every martial arts aristocratic family had their own special formation. The ones who formed these formations were the death attendants that were specially provided by the family. The guard loudly shouted, and several black-clothed people flitted across the treetops. They flew and landed on the ground, surrounding Hellion Vivian in the middle of the courtyard. They were dressed in the same black robes, and their faces were filled with a thick, baleful aura. Their flying kicks were like whirlwinds, and they were filled with a ferocious energy that soared to the sky. The beggar flipped to the side and used his slender palms to support himself on the ground to avoid the long legs that were coming at him. Wind swirled around his body, and a lazy, evil smile hung on the corner of his mouth. He was like a phantom, shuttling back and forth in the middle of the black shadows. As his long hair fluttered slightly, his fingers grabbed one of the people's ankles and pulled hard. Only a few cracking sounds were heard. The 18 shadows disrupted the array formation one by one. By the time they reacted, they were all kneeling on the ground. The guard rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Looking at the black figure hugging his leg and curling up, his heart was in turmoil. Although the Nye family's formation couldn't be considered as the capital's top formation, it was still not easy to deal with a large formation. Without martial chi above the 5th level of the wood rank, it was impossible to break this array. Could it be? This little beggar's martial chi had already reached wood rank level 5. How was that possible? Not to mention the 5th level of the wood rank, even the 5th level of the water rank would be recorded in the Imperial Palace. Because the majority of people would stop at the fire rank, it was very difficult to advance. In the Dragon War Empire, apart from those martial arts aristocratic families' heirs who could reach the water rank, ordinary people simply couldn't break through this standard. But now, in front of their eyes, there was actually a little beggar with an unclear background. What in the world was going on? Quickly go and inform the master. After the guard heard this sentence, he was just about to move. Wait, what? She left. Left? The entire Nye family's courtyard could be described as too horrible to look at. The black shadows were sprawled on the ground in disarray, their faces full of bloodstains. The beggar standing on the roof only curved her lips into a smile. Every word was clear and cold like the wind. Thank you for sparring. Thank you for sparring. Thank you for sparring. Thank you for sparring. Sparring? Elder Nye, who had rushed back from the defense department, heard the servant's report and walked to the center of the courtyard in large strides. His thick eyebrows fiercely wrinkled. The Buddhist beads in his hand also flew out and heavily fell to the ground, shattering into powder. Who is he? What is his identity? Elder Nye was truly angry. He didn't think that in this capital, there would unexpectedly be someone who dared to make a move on top of his head, who didn't know that although his Fong family's martial arts weren't the best, they were the best of the best among the Hellion bloodlines. But today, someone unexpectedly took advantage of the time he went to the defense department to destroy his lair. That's fine. Sparring partner? His Grand Nye family was used as a sparring partner for a little thief? Investigate for me. After you find out, this old man will personally slaughter this little beggar. Elder Nye gnashed his teeth as he spoke. His eyes flashed with unprecedented viciousness. Yes, the guards bowed their heads one after another, not even looking when they spoke loudly. The Nye family's courtyard was a mess. The atmosphere was indescribably heavy. Elder Nye seemed to have thought of something. He turned his head and said in a low voice, "Today's matter. If someone goes outside and gossips, be careful of your dog lives." Yes, this time, the ones who answered were the serving maids and servants. They trembled as they knelt on the ground. Clearly, they were frightened by the old man's words. They simply didn't dare to randomly look around. Nowadays, every major family had set their sights on the martial chi test that was going to be held in the near future. Ordinarily, they all trained intensely. Secretly, they all shouted with all their might. No one was willing to submit to another. If outsiders knew that the Grand Nye family of the Hellion bloodline was unexpectedly beaten by an unknown beggar to the point where they didn't have the strength to fight back, if this matter were to spread, it would certainly reduce the Nye family to a huge joke. But what Fong Shichao didn't expect was that for 3 consecutive days, it wasn't just the Nye family. Even the other 3 families also similarly suffered from an unknown beggar's sweeping. If one family was like this, then they could still conceal the secret. But if the aristocratic families of the capital all encountered the same matter, then the fire couldn't be contained in paper. The entire capital was shaken. Every family was looking for this beggar. They even took out 100,000 taels of silver to put up posters, all for the sake of obtaining her and using her for their own use. And at this time, that beggar had long since transformed into a White Academy student. She was in the middle of earning her first bucket of gold in the true meaning of the ancient times. I really didn't expect that for such a long time. I was actually discussing business with a woman. The one who spoke was the second young master of the He family, He Zhe, a typical second generation of the Northern Army, the 5th most handsome man in the capital, strong and intelligent, wearing a graceful and luxurious cloak and gown. He sat there, propping up his chin. His overbearing gaze sized up Hellion Vivian from head to toe. Then, he smiled coldly. "Everyone thinks you're a hedonistic good-for-nothing, but you're actually a good martial cultivator. You even dared to use me. Hellion Vivian, you really are very daring." You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.